All right, guys, what's up? Let me check over here and make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. I think I have to physically start one of them. Let me know if the audio is better. I don't know what happened. I think a couple of my programs just like crashed at the same exact time, which was a bummer because I was kind of feeling like I was on a roll. Hopefully I can get my groove back. Oh, there's no one there. Just a moment. There's one person, everyone probably got mad. This guy doesn't have his shit together. Okay, it looks like they're both. Both live. All right, guys, so where did you lose me? Can anyone tell me, first of all, whether the audio is okay? And second of all, I think I was talking about how Jesus, and the sun god, this whole thing, about how, Satan may come as an angel of light, they say. And so what did Satan get kicked out of heaven for? For pretending to be God. And they say he's the ultimate deceiver. So he would deceive everyone by doing what? Preaching high morality. Don't throw rocks at hookers. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. And then he comes down here and convinces everyone he's God, just like Satan did in heaven, right? Kind of weird, isn't it? A little bit odd. The first commandment says no other gods, and then you have all these people worshiping Jesus, and no one notices that it's almost exactly the same scenario on earth as it was in heaven. Probably just nuts, but always kind of seemed a bit off to me. I don't know. Yeah, so very strange circumstances with the whole Christian trip, and it is a little bit difficult for me to get right back on track after having the stream crash like that. But I think I can do it. Basically, we were talking about Blavatsky as well, Blavatsky and all of those people. So, according to Kybalion, and this is something that it seems like it must be true to some extent. Because it didn't really happen in a lot of indigenous cultures that didn't sort of move on to the next phase where there was really opportunity for exploitation and the sort of invitation to letting the vampire in the house, that influence wasn't really there so much. And so according to the author of the Kybalion, the Hermes Trismegistus was some sort of magician or prophet. I have suspected that it's more like the star tribes, which are maybe just almost like holograms or something, but you definitely can sort of communicate with them. I just had a very strong intuitive feeling many years ago that Thoth Hermes was not an actual human being. But at the end of the day, what he's claiming happened is that this original truth of all of humanity, as Albert Pike said, man had the truth, but wandering in the darkness of superstition and darkness and ignorance, he found error. And that's basically what happened. And so the idea is that this Hermetic philosophy emanated from Egypt. It found its way to Babylonian Syria, and from there it was carried by Pythagoras to ancient Greece, and from there it was taken to England, and from there it was taken to the United States. And you can actually draw a physical lineage line from Pythagoras to, I don't actually know who is the intermediaries between Pythagoras and Newton and that kind of crowd. Newton, Bohm, and all these people there. And then to Aleister Crowley eventually, and then to Huxley, and from Huxley to Leary. So that is how we kind of ended up with this movement, this evolution of consciousness that's kind of propelled by these mystery adept magicians. And at any rate, though, the idea is that this I don't want to call it a religion or a dogma. These ideas were actually spread around the Middle East, and they turned into the religions that we know today. But it was a gross distortion, a deliberate perversion, in an effort to separate the pagans from their beliefs. And in order to pacify, ironically, because we're kind of in the same history repeating itself, right? They were trying to pacify the Palestinians as well, the Palestinian tribes. Man, that's crazy. Why do I have two? Oh my God, the vertical one didn't work. Anyways, so yeah, that stream crash really threw me off, man. Trying to get back on track. Okay, so there are levels of understanding that go beyond what's in the Kybalion, and I'll give you guys an example of that. Earlier today in our secret stream, we were talking about how the light, when it's refracted, becomes 7 rays, and these 7 rays represent these fundamental aspects of the consciousness that constitutes creation. And because of the reflective holographic nature of the universe, there's 7 hermetic principles that are sort of extrapolated from these 7 fundamental frequencies. So the first one is the principle of mentalism, that the all is mind, that the universe is somehow fundamentally an emanation of consciousness. And this is one of the things, earlier when I was talking about how it always seemed so completely batshit insane to me that, so many people only seem to be able to think in terms of either there's a creator God that is deliberately managing the affairs of human beings, or there's no God and it's completely blind matter that's just randomly doing stuff. And, some people, when I've actually pointed out to them that, you look at the complexity of your mouth even. You're telling me that randomly, accidentally happened? Like, it's like saying a fucking tornado flew over a junkyard and assembled a 747, except it's worse. Like, it's a non sequitur. It does not follow. It does not follow. It does not track. And then, you go beyond that. The human eyeball, Darwin said, was enough to challenge his entire theory. And then we seem to have also been endowed with apparatus for perceiving beyond the physical world, because the pineal gland definitely has a function. Anyone that has drank a lot of ayahuasca or smoked a lot of DMTs probably experienced this at some point, but it will actually become activated to the point where you can see through it. You can see through your forehead. And I have tested this tremendously. Not only that, but there was undeniable telepathy that was occurring between me and the shaman forever after that. I mean, not just that night, but forever after. And in fact, after I had the experience and I tested it with my eyes closed, when I went downstairs to have breakfast the next morning, he just looks at me and he goes, "You can see through your forehead when you drink the medicine sometimes," because he doesn't know what a third eye is. It's not part of his world, which is even more evidence, right? And so I went home and I investigated to see whether the third eye was attached to rods and cones and the neovisual cortex, and it turns out that it is. That's what I mean about this sort of middle ground between materialism and religious faith. The things that we suggest and talk about and support are, if not like 100% testable, they're pretty goddamn convincing, So the principle of mentalism, that the all is somehow consciousness. Oh, what I was saying about that is it's really obvious to me that there's at least some sort of consciousness, some sort of intelligence that is inextricably intertwined with the fundamental fabric of the creation. And so the principle of correspondence, this is one of the most important aspects of this kind of thinking too, because you can check all of this stuff, When you get into like pop culture spirituality, one of the things that bothers me the most about it is that people have no method of testing. Oftentimes people claim to be channeling and everyone just accepts it. I don't know if they're being polite or if they really just think that that's happening all the time or what that is exactly. But we don't do that in the school of scientific illuminism. It's, subjective experience doesn't really mean a lot. But if you can say, you go to Egypt and you see a bunch of pyramids and then everyone else also sees the pyramids, there are actually pyramids there. And so we don't separate our approach to understanding spirituality and our purpose and all of that stuff. There's no difference in the methodology for discerning, are there actually pyramids there? And can you actually see through your forehead when you drink ayahuasca? You know what I mean? Does it really make you telepathic? We're going to apply the same set of strict and stringent evaluating protocol to make to ascertain anything about the unseen world, And so the principle of correspondence has to do with as above, so below, as below, so above. And the principle embodies the truth that there's always a correspondence between the laws of phenomena and of the various planes of being in life. The old Hermetic axioms ran in these words: as above, so below, as below, so above. This is another great example of one of the protocols that's used in scientific illuminism, always has been, that when you see ideas emerge in disparate cultures that are identical, and there's no possibility of communication between them, it is an indication that it could be something worth considering. Man, we did not rebound back to the numbers we had. God damn. I'm sorry, guys. It's just so frustrating because it takes me so long to get everything set up in order to stream to multiple platforms and everything. So when it goes haywire, when we have 500 people watching and now we have 6, that is not, that's almost proof of evil spirits to me. But yeah, I was going to give you guys a couple of really good examples of as above, so below. In the last half of the stream, I know I mentioned one that was really solid. One of those is the correlation between the ratios, it's not the Fibonacci sequence exactly, but it's sort of the same idea that if you shrink down so small relative to the Earth, as you would be if you were standing on the nucleus of an atom, there would be about the same distance between where you're standing and the moon, to the nearest proton, I think it is. So, it's the exact same thing at totally different scales. And then when you open up matter, you take a powerful microscope and you zoom into this table, eventually it's just going to be nothingness. There's just a space that opens and opens and opens and opens. So, there's another element of that everything contains its contradiction, that something is nothing. And it's so counterintuitive and so paradoxical, but tell me what energy is. Go ahead, I dare you. Go look it up. What is it? I'll save you the trouble. The ability to do work. What's ability? What is it? Nothing. Nothing there. Fundamentally, there is no particle. So, this sort of idea of correspondence is also, that's polarity, really. That if you go far enough around, you'll end up back where you were, for one thing. But also, that the two extremes of one concept or one phenomena, extremes meet, basically. So something actually is nothingness, and nothingness is somethingness. And this is something that you find in all sorts of traditions all over the world, but now we have the technology to actually try to look at the particle and realize there's nothing there. And so then that raises a whole bunch more questions, because I think 5 years ago or something, they determined that electrons know when they're being watched. So the double slit experiment that was sort of proposed to people as proof that consciousness had some sort of interaction on matter, that's not what it proves. That's just the bastardization. That's what happens when an amateur tries to understand physics. It's not true, exactly. The answer is not really known, but that's not the answer. In fact, that experiment was popularized in pop culture by the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And if you got it on CD, because I was that old when it came out on DVD, or I'm that old, so I had it on DVD, there was a special features disc, and it had interviews with the physicists, and they were fuming pissed. They were like, this is not, they edited everything together to make them say stuff that fit their narrative. You know, and I know that's probably super disappointing to people that really love those ideas in that movie and stuff, but it was made by Fox News. It was made by Fox. And they were lying through their teeth about a lot of shit. In fact, the ice crystal experiment from that movie, where they had all the different ice crystals that they had taped words to, and supposedly that was going to make it like do something. Those were pictures of snowflakes. Ice crystals don't look like that, no matter what you do. And they have tried to repeat those experiments in the same conditions, tons of people, and it's just not true. There's no reality to it at all whatsoever. And the real thing that gave it away is when you look at the slide that has a bunch of nasty words taped to it, and it's like green and yellow, and you can tell it's like oil mixed with water and stuff. Like, I mean, people are so determined to have these sort of magical beliefs about things that, you know, I mean, I couldn't imagine getting to the slide that is all different colors and looks like it has oils in it and stuff. Like, you go up to a glass of water and be like, fuck you, and see if it turns green and yellow, you know? You can't alter your slides if it's a legitimate experiment. And then he did another one with rice, where he said if you yelled obscenities at it and left it in the closet, the one that you were nice to would not mold, and the one that you were mean to would mold. There's, of course, obvious discrepancy and stupidity there, because for mold to devour and transmute the energy of the rice is creation. It's life. So how is it that the one you screamed at, giving rise to life, just because you don't like that particular life form or the smell of it, how is that? It doesn't even make any sense. And yet people are like, wow, just think a little bit more about this stuff, and it just falls apart. And, you know, I'm not trying to troll people. I'm just saying, like, this is a completely different approach. You know, scientific illuminism and the approach of mystery adepts is very different from what you find in like New Age spirituality and religion. So the principle of correspondence, again, I remember I mentioned a really good one in the physical reflecting in the spiritual, I guess. That's one of the ways that we discern what might be true about something like reincarnation. So the example I gave in the first half of the stream was that, you know, Crowley said that reincarnation can be understood like when the sun swallows up a planet, all of the elements will become themselves again. So a single molecule of carbon may go through all of these incarnations as salt, shells, coal, diamond, and then when the sun swells up and causes them to separate, that same molecule of carbon will emerge unchanged, and that's how we know how reincarnation works, because you look at the fundamental unit that gives rise to the life of the universe, and it's carbon, and so we can sort of infer from that that's what happens with the fundamental part of ourselves, that it remains unchanged throughout its incarnations. So let's see if there's any more. The principle of mentalism. The principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the term of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses is spirit, which is itself unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole, and its parts or units, had its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention and which, without explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. And so the most complete set of talents and virtues is totally useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. That's one way to put that. And then the other thing to do with this knowledge, there's a lot of layers to it. But before I get into those layers, I also want to point out I don't agree with every single statement in this book. It really bothers me that he often just randomly claims that this is from higher masters, this information. That's not necessary. You don't need to predicate your knowledge on, that's one of the things I don't like about people that claim to channel aliens and stuff. That guy Bashar, all he does basically is just regurgitate the Kybalion with his eyes closed, and then people are amazed because they think it's this alien that's transmitting this shit through him. You don't need to do that. You don't need to predicate your knowledge on some higher source. Truth is self-substantiating, It casts no shadows. And the shadows that are will be gone as the light moves. So this idea that the all is mind, right? You notice some things. One of the reasons that science criticizes telepathy, which I know 100%, I know very few things 100%, that I would really say I know this 100% to be true. But one of those things is that telepathy is real. Precognition also, I've had to an extent that is undeniable. There's no possibility in my mind that... Also, that time that I decided I wanted to talk to Danny Carey from Tool and just drove to him, that kind of stuff shows me without any kind of question at all whatsoever that there are capacities of consciousness that we don't necessarily officially acknowledge in our culture. But science says it's not repeatable. So if you can't sit down and do it every single time, then it's not real, and that's not how life is. That's not how the universe is. We can set up physical systems that will more or less do the same thing over and over again every time. But in the same way that sometimes you're unable to retrieve a memory and then some other day suddenly you are, any kind of magical processes like that and telepathy and the psychic capacities, I've never, ever been able to find a person that can do it at will all the time. It just doesn't always work. So, that's something to consider. And another thing to consider is that one of the great tragedies, I think, of our predominant spiritual outlook, I guess, it's really a cultural aberration, I guess, this anti-intellectualism. You look at Taylor Swift becoming a billionaire and all this just ridiculous shit, and it's the most vapid, shallow, simple, stupid, Being in Latin America, even 15 years ago, all these amazing rhythms and polyrhythms and the music, and now you hear dum 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 dum. That's it. That's it. Every country, almost everywhere, dum 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 dum. What happened? They're literally dumbing down the entire planet, and so. One of the things that I can offer for you to encourage, if you find mathematics tedious and you don't want to do intellectual work and you don't think that corresponds with your spiritual development, I hate to tell you this, but it definitely does. All parts of your being are equally important. In the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, we called that balancing the pentagram. And so you had spirit at the top, and as you went around, creativity and intellect and fertility and money and all of that stuff. So, if you have an imbalanced pentagram, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll topple over, And so the idea is that you have to give equal attention to all of these things, something I've absolutely not been able to do myself, particularly when it comes to the area of emotion. I tend to be pretty neutral, no matter what. And that's not good. Anyways, the point is that if you need an explanation of why it's important to cultivate your mind in order to really have a accurate perception of the universe and to cultivate a higher degree of consciousness. When you study something like calculus and trigonometry, your brain has to adapt and create new structures within itself in order to process the information it's receiving. And so when you create these networks that are basically new neural geometries in your head, you are giving yourself the capacity to process information on an entirely new level with more dimensions than before. So it's an incredibly important thing, you know. And I think that dissuading people from obtaining the kind of understanding and knowledge and power that comes from learning about the mysteries and actually following the protocol, you know, that they deliberately demonize that. It's why they've demonized the Illuminati. It's why Freemasons have been demonized. And it's why religions like Christianity have been promoted so much. Because it will intervene in your progress to becoming a spiritually empowered, self-aware, sovereign being. That is not their agenda. And, you know, honestly, I think one of the reasons that we're under so much surveillance all of a sudden and things are getting so wild out there is precisely because so many of us were starting to figure this out. How? There's like all these streams running. I didn't do that. Dude, there is a ghost in my... All right, let's talk about that for a second, because it's starting to freak me out, man. I haven't changed anything. Like, I haven't touched anything. This is exactly the same as I do it every single night. All right, so here's what happened last night. Was it my first night here? Second night? First night? I don't know. Maybe second night. And I was laying in bed, and my guitar was open, because in the jungle, it was wrapped in this plastic. And I think the heat drew the water out. So I opened my guitar case up and there's like mold in there and stuff. And so I opened it up to air it out. So it was open with the strings exposed. And I'm laying in bed and I hear boom. And I'm like, kitty? Kitty, kitty, kitty? Because they have a cat. And I sat up and I didn't really move. I just sat up and listened. And then I heard the next string, dong. And I was like, oh no, no, no. So I get up and I'm thinking there's going to be a big beetle walking across the strings or a cat or something. And there's nothing there. There was nothing there. And for sure, both of those strings rang out individually, clear as day. And then it stopped. But it really got me, just kind of weirded out. So I went out and picked some Toei flowers, the Brumansia. And in Ecuador, I would drink 2 flowers for insomnia and inflammation. And I knew these were much stronger because the smell was so intense and overwhelming. So I just drank half of it, maybe a little bit more. And I went to go to bed. And the rest of the night, I'm pretty sure I was actually waking up and then going back to sleep, but there was no difference. I was completely like lucid, but things weren't quite right. Like I was laying in the bed and I would see like coins, and I would try to pick them up to get them out of the bed, and my fingers would just go through the coins, and eventually it was click like, oh, they're not there really or something. And then my partner that I just split up with was there at one point. And I'm like, can you help me get these coins out of the bed? Because I don't want them here. And she picked them up and could sort of put them in my hand. And they would stay a little bit more, but then they would just fall through. And everything that's happening in my life was like emerging into this weird, like dreaming wake state. And probably part of the reason I've been a little bit scattered tonight too, because it's just really... It was really bizarre, and I don't know how much sleep I actually got, which, it's really effective for insomnia, it really is, and usually it's not even intoxicating. And it was not a full strength experience, which is scary to think about. But then, so after my partner was there, then I thought all this was real still, some of it this morning, because I need a mop, and I was going to ask the landlord if they had one here, or if I should go buy one. And so I woke up and I thought, oh yeah, she told me that mop was somewhere last night, but I don't see a mop, and then it hit me, that wasn't real. I was like, what? And then even the thumbnail I used today came from this experience. It was like projected onto the wall in the room, and there was some guy standing beside it, and he's pointing to the symbols, and he's like, this needs to be there and that, and like explaining everything. So I have AI generate it. It was insane, man. And then when I woke up, I felt really, really weird. Like if you've ever taken Xanax or something too much, and you wake up like, my vision is still a little double. Like when I'm trying to read, there's like double. So yeah, let that be a lesson that the Andean Toei is much, much stronger than the Ecuadorian version. Yeah, I know. I don't understand how that happened, because the way it's set up is that I'm only supposed to be able to do one vertical and one horizontal, and that's what I have showing in OBS here. There's the horizontal and there's the vertical. So anyways, I'm going to check and see if I can fix this one more time, and then we'll just get back to business. But I mean, I hope you guys are really taking to heart, if you haven't considered this stuff, what it means, especially with mathematics, to reorganize the brain. And no, dude, it's not the same one. This is the horizontal one, I think. No. Oh, I see. Okay, well, whatever. Damn it. This principle by establishing the mental nature of the universe. Oh, yeah, and so here's another aspect of that I would like to offer, and that's that you cannot run a program intended for a Commodore 64 from 1981 on an Apple iPhone. Will not work, and vice versa. But actually, that's not true. You could you could sort of. You'd have to make some programming changes, but you know what I mean. You have to upgrade the hardware in order to run software that is more sophisticated and more advanced. So when you take psychedelics like DMT, psilocybin, even apparently ketamine and MDMA, although I wouldn't use MDMA very often, and I would use it, but I wouldn't use it often, and not for this purpose. But LSD is actually the best for this, which is interesting. I would have thought it would have been DMT or something, but the enhanced neuroplasticity and catalyzed neurogenesis that comes from consuming psychedelics, especially when it's combined with something like pranayama, where you're inundating the brain with oxygen, which is the fuel that it needs to, drive memory and to build new synaptic passageways and neural networks and all that sort of stuff. So if you are combining these things where you are diligently learning everything you can about the actual physical world, calculus and trigonometry, and just take mathematics, keep going, linear algebra, like all of it, just keep going as far as you can. There are no limits. Why would you impose limitations upon yourself anyways? Because, you're made of light. The photon is the only thing in the universe we know of that's eternal. They think they last forever. So, bearing all that in mind, might as well, you are infinite, so you might as well embrace the totality of creation and become the highest potential expression of that you can. What a nightmare with the streaming tonight, though, man. It's really upsetting. Yeah, we only have 4 people in here. I know, but it was crazy earlier. We had there was 300 or 400 people total between the two. And for some reason, when I fixed it and went back on, the really rough part about that is that as soon as I canceled the stream, I noticed that it actually already was fixed. So anyways, I think that's probably enough about the principle of correspondence and Okay, the principle of vibration. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest, facts which modern science endorses and which new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. From the all, which is spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter and whose vibrations are so low as to seem at rest. Between these two poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration, from corpuscle to electron, atom and molecule, to worlds and universes. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration. The thing is, that's not really quite right. It is true that there are vibrations, and if you call an oscillating wave a vibration, then I guess you could say that fundamentally everything is vibration. But on the scale of the subatomic, atoms don't really have spin. They don't spin. Electrons are not spinning around them. They're blinking in and out of existence very, very rapidly. Something that I forgot to mention earlier is that I had this idea that the reason that they cannot find the link between quantum mechanics and general relativity is that it has to do with scale and time, right? So if you were to shrink so that you were relative to the nucleus of an atom, the same size you are to the Earth now, the electrons would be blinking in and out of existence in the same amount of time that stars are born and die. That's what I think would happen. And I actually have been able to, there are physicists that are thinking about this. I'm not really sure how you could possibly scale something to go in there and measure that, but it must be true. It must be. So I think motion may be a better term even than vibration. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, and now that is important and extremely powerful. It is indeed a scepter of power. And the reason for that is something called entrainment. Entanglement also. But I think of entanglement as more of like the subconscious version of the process, right? It's just automatic. It's happening at a very fundamental level and instantly. So it's probably less predicated on like willful decisions and whatnot, you know? It's... Entrainment is potentially more important because of the fact that a faster oscillation draws the lower up to it, right? So if you lay beside me in a bed, y'all want to see my Riz? It doesn't exist. But if you lay down beside me in a bed or whoever, my heart is beating much faster, yours will speed up too. And it's not because, you know, it's turning you on. It's because there's entrainment between our electromagnetic fields. And if there are electrical wires that are run alongside each other, the same thing will happen. The pulses will synchronize eventually. Clocks do it. Anything that has any sort of motion, basically, will entrain with the higher. And so when a magician talks about constraining a demon to his will, what he's really saying is that this thing of a lower nature has no... And God, right? God is making the demon cooperate, sort of. It's the rules of the universe. It's the laws of the universe that are making it cooperate. So what that really means is that you are taking some aspect of yourself, like greed or lust or gluttony, and you are attempting to transmute it because you can't get rid of the energy, right? But you can turn it into something else. And now we're kind of back to alchemy, but that's kind of the real truth about the Goetia and working with demons and whatnot. You know, the dog, too. I noticed in my travels that, you know, in the United States, sometimes you have dog attacks that just rip people to pieces. It doesn't really happen here. No one is nice to dogs. The dogs do what they're expected to. They'll come up and bark at you and almost nip at your ankles, but so rarely do people get bitten. And I think it's because they have entrained with their masters. So there's there's a telepathic link that is compelling the dog to behave in a certain way, you know? And so in a situation where we have censorship and our ability to communicate is limited, these two elements of the principle of vibration, entrainment and entanglement, give us the ability to lift up consciousness without having to physically communicate, without, we don't have to convince anyone. And it's a kind of more of a beautiful way to approach it because, I don't like the idea of me trying to influence you to think a certain way, But if I am just generally ascending and that it causes you to be pulled along with me because of the laws of nature, that means that if I'm correct and I'm doing what I'm supposed to, then it's good for you, and you're being allowed to actually go through the process on your own terms. And so that's another pretty strong defense against the people that say that those of us that are involved in these kind of fraternities and scientific illuminism and whatnot are like cult-oriented. It's like the only spiritual system that's kind of immune to that, Like we're not trying to do that. The whole point is that every person has to cut their own path through the jungle, But whoever went before them, if they don't tell them what kind of snakes and shit are out there and where the food is, and so you can give a little bit of an overview of the territory. But beyond that, there's no necessity for anything, And then the principle of polarity. This is one of the aspects of this that can be really difficult for people to accept or even think about, I think. Why do I have two? Whatever. Because, the idea that evil creates good, for example, is difficult for a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons that this kind of knowledge was considered secret and guarded against the profane. Because in the wrong hands, even in the right hands, it can be extremely dangerous. And so, it's not necessarily about consolidating power in weird little groups of people. It's also about the fact that if you want to rise above all the dirt and grime, you must add the right spice at the right time. And adding this kind of knowledge as spice to the pot of humanity, it's something we have to do now. This was decided by Adepts basically in the time of Aleister Crowley, I think. It's the reason that he didn't get his tongue cut out and whatever, they permitted it. And Israel Regardie also broke his oaths and printed the entire secret writings of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And, so the general consensus, I think, is that there's no more secrecy now. And not to say that if you join the Masons or the OTO or something, they're not going to expect you to be secret. That's actually one of the reasons that after I took initiation with the Scottish Rite, even though they had made me some very interesting offers, because if you have a certain level of knowledge, you don't have to start at the bottom. And they definitely was selling it pretty hard. But I didn't want to be committed to silence, because I don't think that's the approach that we need. And I really don't want anyone telling me what I can and can't do, So. What's the concept of the Golden Dawn? Well, it's basically, just occult knowledge like any other secret society. But the process that occurs, and this actually goes right along with polarity. That's great you asked this question, because now I can use polarity to explain and show you guys how these symmetries and stuff like always just emerge in every the laws of the universe govern every aspect of it, right? So if it applies to a society, it applies to a person, it applies to thinking, you know what I mean? It's universal. So check it out. So 1888, McGregor Mathers and Wynne Westcott, two 33rd degree Masons, broke off from the main body of Freemasonry, partly because Freemasonry, despite what they tell you below the third degree, is not Christian. It's not Christian. And in fact, if you guys join the Patreon and watch my secret streams where I go through the degrees, you can see how he's gradually kind of chipping away at the Christian indoctrination, like little by little, more gently, more rough and direct as it goes on. That's part of the deconditioning. It wasn't Christian enough for him, I guess. Or, it wasn't weird enough, too. I think they were, like, way more esoteric. And the thing is, the official rules and protocol of Freemasonry is that if you are 33rd degree or higher and you leave the main body, your lineage that you create is valid. So McGregor Mathers and Wynne Westcott, and so Crowley, William Butler Yeats also, a few other famous people, were the original members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in 1888. And check this out, their slogan, what they would tell the new initiates is, inheritor of a dying world, quit the night and seek the day. But when I saw that they were telling people inheritor of a dying world in 1888, I was like, holy shit, What is at the highest levels, if not Christian? The stuff that they draped the myth of Christianity around, it's this stuff. I'll explain that again in a little while. I mean, I did talk about it in the last half, but I don't know if we were having distortion problems when I did or not. Okay, but here's the polarity thing. At exactly the same time, two 33rd degree Freemasons in Germany, so this was England, where the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, so on the other side of the coin, to two left-hand path guys that felt like Freemasonry wasn't evil enough, they broke off to go and start like a sex magic-oriented cult at this point, basically. Crowleyanity, people call it and stuff, and he hated it. By the time he died, he hated the OTO. He did not want them to turn him into a martyr and a prophet and stuff. He was joking when he talked about himself that way, sort of. He knew it was going to happen. But anyway, so see what I'm saying? Opposite polarities. Right-hand path, left-hand path, same time, break off from the lodge. And there's a commonality. There always is, because there's a line down the center that is sustaining these two, the convergence of the vectors. So who's the common denominator? Aleister Crowley. He had joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in 1888, right when it started, and pretty quickly he became disenchanted with Mathers, and really the camel that broke the straw's back was Crowley bought this place called Boleskine House, and he went there to do the sacred workings of Abramelin and the Mage, the goal of which is to make direct and a very clear connection with the higher self, holy guardian angel, whatever, and it's a really grueling, long, 6 months long, isolation the entire time. It's like a dieta literally from hell, because you invoke the 4 crown princes of evil before it's over with. It's a dieta from hell, And there's all these conditions. There has to be a door in the house facing to the east, and there has to be one to the south with the sand so you can see the footprints of the beings that you're invoking. And so a couple of things happened. So Crowley did this. He got about halfway through it. Mathers ran out of money. Crowley had an inheritance, and Mathers said, I need help. And Crowley was like, yes, master, and just left without banishing anything, cleaning up the energy. And a lot of people actually think that he's the one that fucked the whole planet up, that it was the things that he let out. And again, with Jack Parsons, who was an early NASA rocket scientist. If you listen to the Tool, there's a track where this guy calls the George Norrie radio station, and he's like, You know what? I'm just going to shut this other stream down. No reason to use all this data and like. What was I saying about Jack Parsons? Was that who I was talking about? Yeah, that he let all this stuff through. And the original wave, you know, Roswell and all these kind of things of like aliens happened when he did that second working, I think, right before he died in 1947. That's the one where they, the Alamantra workings, him and Jack Parsons, where actually John Lennon's son and Les Claypool from Primus put a band together, and then they did a song about Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley. The video's on YouTube, definitely awesome. Jimmy's dragon suit, exactly. Yeah, Jimmy Page bought Boleskine House at one point, and he had his high school friend go and live there with his family to take care of it, and he only went there once, he said. It's just crazy to think somebody could do that. But the guy that took over the house said there was this column that was walled in the center, and that this thing would try to pound its way out on some nights. Like, you'd hear this crazy, like, demonic growling and smashing on the walls and stuff. And I don't know if I buy it, but that's what he said. And there actually is an interview with some people that went onto the property and apparently just died or lost their minds as soon as they walked onto the property. In one case, there was like a military guy that had bought it, and he had a maid, and he shot himself in the head, and then she went and found him, and this is on YouTube, the actual interview with this lady, and she's obviously batshit crazy. And she's like, I kicked a piece of his skull across the room to the dog. You're like, what the fuck, lady? It's pretty wild, the story. So he figured out that Mathers was not somebody he wanted to fucks with anymore. So he went back to Boleskine House. Nothing crazy happened to him. I mean, but he didn't. And it is true that he became much, much darker after this. He was originally all white magician, Christian even. But that went away. And so where are we at in this tale now? Boleskine House, Crowley. Oh, okay. So a few years later, he published a book called Book of Lies. And one day he's sitting around at home, I guess, and man, I am so pissed that stream dropped and we never got the audience back. Oh my God. You know why? It's because I only get so many notifications per day. And because I did 2 and then I did 4, no notifications going out. Anyways, enough complaining. That's all right. We'll just, you know what? I'll talk about this stuff like 2 or 3 times a week, and we'll just make it a regular thing. Because the reality is that every time I go through it, I'll figure something out new. You know, if I really do it for a couple of hours, there's always something that I can find that didn't occur to me before working through this material, even just thinking about it extensively. McGregor Mathers, not McGregor Mathers, the 2 left-hand path guys, the OTO. He publishes this book called The Book of Lies, and they come and knock on his door, and they're like, what the fuck? Why did you print our secrets? And he said, I haven't taken your oath. And they're like, oh, well, if that's the case, then you're in charge now. And they made him Baphomet. They gave him the title Baphomet, and they made him the head of the outer order, not the inner order, but the outer order, worldwide on the spot. And another interesting thing about this, everything containing its contradiction and these weird antinomies and shit, the Freemason that conferred Crowley's 33rd degree on him, his name was Jesus. Jesus initiated the Antichrist into the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, a guy named Jesus. Like, you can't make this shit up, you know? Like, okay, here's a couple of other interesting ones. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has 2 poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes. that have perplexed so many, and can be stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. That's not always true. The bass player from the Grateful Dead once told me, do not try to resolve the paradoxes. They're not meant to be resolved. I met him at his club a few times, and I had one conversation with him where I asked him for advice. And that was one of the things that he offered. Do not attempt to resolve the paradoxes. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half truths. Every truth is half false. It is both true and false to say these things. All of these things are both true and false, and it is both true and false to say that they are true and false. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. This is actually really important too, because I'm not saying that I agree with gender-affirming surgery on children and stuff. You know, don't take that away from what I'm about to say. But if you have eyes in your head and you're able to observe, you'll notice that everything is on a spectrum. You know, some men are all men. There's not an ounce of femininity anywhere in them. There must be, but it's like a little corpuscle of, it's nothing, you know? And then there are women that are so butch that they could probably just rip that brick wall out and throw it in the yard, you know? They're on a spectrum, and then there's everything in between. And the same thing is true of intelligence and enlightenment and creativity and, you know, wealth, and that's how it all is. And so the basic understanding of the functionality of the universe, what it's doing and why, is it's fulfilling all the potential positions on and all of their vectors, so where they intersect with other aspects. Manly, womanly, rich, poor, rich, you know what I mean? You have all these different vectors converging, and they yield all of these different things. And then once there are no more, because it's not quite infinite, because the laws, in order for something to be something definable, it has to have limitations. Right? So if you say, like, well, the universe is God, what you're really saying is that, well, there was this eternal and infinite thing, but it limited itself in order for it to have definition and lines and character and, you know, functionality and whatnot. And, you know, you can see how, like, if I want to be a great guitarist, I must practice all the time, which means I have to limit my freedom. But that limitation, if I were to become a rock star, is transmuted into absolute freedom. So, you know, this is the formula and the understanding. And so what I was saying, though, is that once all of the possible possibilities are fulfilled, when all of your wishes are granted, all of your dreams will have been destroyed. When all of your wishes are granted, all of your dreams will have been destroyed. You know, so once it is all fulfilled, it has nowhere to go, and it collapses back into the singularity, and then it becomes again. And I didn't mention earlier when we were talking about the idea that the all is mind, that this sort of origin of that is sort of in the Kabbalah, and it's what the book of Genesis, if you read it in the original language more so, kind of conveys. That this nothingness became conscious, and as soon as there was awareness and space, then there were two things, and there's duality. And because the whole thing is reflection by means, or replication by means of reflection, it's basically the same structure repurposed for another design, but everything has this one fundamental structure of this dualistic, paradoxical nature. And I just wanted to throw that in there because another thing with the principle of polarity is that we tend to think of the universe as having a bunch of relative constituents. So, you know, it's like speed, I guess, could be relative. You know, generally things are relative, but we have certain constants, right? Like thermodynamic constants and gravitational constant, and the speed of light is a constant. But what temperature do you boil water at? Right? But what if you're at 23,000 feet? 89 degrees. So water doesn't even boil at the same temperature anywhere on Earth, you know. Even these constants are variable. And I'm willing to bet that the speed of light, there is some sort of variable. And people are claiming that they have discovered that recently, that it's true. And it has to be true, and here's why. If everything contains its contradiction, then a constant is relative, and a relative thing is constant. You know, it's a matter of perspective, I guess. Check the chat again. '84th birthday? Oh my God, man. I was trying to check the chat. Oysterhead? You're talking about Oysterhead in there now? I haven't thought about Oysterhead in hella long time. By the way, guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. We have all kinds of other options to support the channel in the chat. And it's super important right now because I am in the middle of tremendous difficulty. And I'm not letting it be daunting, but I would like it to be a little bit easier. You know, that would be good. I'm getting old. My heart can't handle this shit anymore. Where were we? Somebody asked a question or something. Tezos. Yeah, okay. So I started to talk about this earlier and got sidetracked as well. There's always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, and the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermetists find the understanding of the principle most important. And one way to, in your own practice, when you have an idea and you think you have stumbled upon absolute law, absolute truth, if it doesn't apply to every single system you can think of, then it's not one. But when you do, you'll discover that it absolutely applies to absolutely everything without exception. The Hermetists have grasped this principle, finding it a universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. Any required change may be effected through the application of the proper kind and degree of force to the proper object to the proper medium. If failure occurs, it is proof that one of the postulates has not been fulfilled. Period, end of story. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot, the mental law of neutralization, I'll tell you how to do that. And it's really helpful because, you know, we all have biases, we all have indoctrination, some of us less than others. We all have indoctrination, you know, we all have this stuff. And one way to get rid of it is to meet everything you think with its opposite. And when these two antinomies are combined, because the laws of the universe are acting upon them, it's going to result in the same kind of alchemical process that, you know, physical alchemical work would. So when you are annihilating these worlds and creating a new universe in your mind constantly, it will free you from your predispositions and beliefs. I'm probably going to, because that stream got dropped, I'm going to have to do this entire thing over again because it's important. I feel like it's important for people to understand this. And, you know, I've watched a lot of the videos on the Kybalion just a little bit, but all they do is just like say the principles. They don't really, you know, break it down as much as kind of need to. Yeah. They have learned how to use the principles instead of being used by it. And that corresponds with our knowledge that we are mostly automatic. Subconscious processes are dictating to us almost everything we do, everything we say, and everything we think. And so by making the subconscious conscious, we are able to mitigate a lot of that automata from our behavior. And in doing so, we liberate ourselves from conditioning. The problem is, however, that you must have structure, and it's good to even have guidance, I guess, which I did not. But you can overdo it. Some of our subconscious programming is there to make us functional people. And, I tore mine down to the point where I lost a lot of that. I mean, I became so logical and rational at some point that I could not think about sex the way that normal humans do. Because I'm thinking about it completely as it is, logically and rationally. It's like you take these weird things, it's like absurd looking little wiener thing, and then put it in this like funky, like, almost like a wound or something, and it's like slimy, and like this is like what runs the human race. Like, it's like a glorified sneeze at the end, and like that's, I couldn't, and it got to the point, I'm a little better now, but at the peak of this, like, why do people think breasts are attractive? It's literally a sack of fat. Like, who cares, And men are even uglier. Like, what is this? Like, people are under this weird spell where they just like do this stuff and they don't think about what the fuck it is really, And it dominates, and they do evil shit all the time to like satiate this stupid ass urge, But in the end, that wasn't good, That I took it too far, just way too far. So you got to have the ability to sort of mitigate how far you take this stuff sometimes. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously, and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermetists. Hermetists? That's not how I would say that. And the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. A great example of this, I was sort of on my spiritual awakening quest, or at least the accelerated segment of it. And I had this huge stack of papers of printouts of like Crowley and other stuff in the passenger seat beside me in my car. And I pulled over in the John Muir Forest, which is where the Ewok scenes were filmed in the original Star Wars. And it was in the redwoods, and I was just chilling, and I looked at that stack of paper, and I was like, yeah, let's just grab something from the middle. So I pulled this piece of paper out from the middle and started to read it, and it said the neophyte, which is in the early stages of initiation. The neophyte sees a slug, and he thinks, what is this message from the very God of very gods to my very soul? But the master of the temple says, how can I use it? And I open my door and get out of the car, and there's a giant banana slug right next to the door. But yeah, that's just another, I guess, expression of how, there are stages in this stuff. You have to first understand how it works, and then you have to figure out how to use it. Otherwise, you're just an armchair magician. Definitely, I've been guilty of that myself. Full confessional, Fucking weird noises again. And so another thing that's really helpful, I think, to bear in mind is that when people think of magic and magicians, they generally think of people like overriding the laws of nature and making things happen through mojo and superstitious, weird spells and fucking bat wings and pots or whatever. And that's got nothing to do with anything. None of that stuff, really. What it is learning the laws of nature and developing your intuition and building a bridge between the conscious and the subconscious mind so that you can actually use the laws in such a way that you appear to be transcending them to the uninitiated or the profane. It's not really about developing magical powers. It's about using the laws of nature to transcend limitations. That's all. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, and nothing escapes the law. I'm not so sure about all that. People say that there is no chaos, and I think that if you're just looking through enlightened goggles, the world is made of equal parts of everything, 50-50, 50-50, 50-50, light, darkness, hot, cold, like everything is distributed in perfect balance. You can see this in the subatomic particles because there's always an anti-corollary to every single particle. So if you have, a neutron or proton and electron, muon and gluon, they all have a negative corollary, right? So that tells you that everything is in perfect balance. Even when you look at the yin-yang symbol, it's 50-50, light and darkness. It's a completely different culture. So when people are kind of trying to sell this idea that we're going to go towards 1,000 years of peace, or we're going to enter into some new evolutionary paradigm where there's no war and there's no sickness and there's no death and all this shit, they're blowing smoke up your ass. It's never going to happen. It can't happen. We may be able to lift the floor, but we're always going to have an equal distribution of all of these different types of energy. There is no escape from duality beyond death. Now, the one caveat that I will allow for that is that it's possible that from a really elevated or from a different perspective, that which appeared to be chaos is actually symmetry. But follow that logic out. Follow it out. From your new perspective, the old order is now chaos, so it's still there. You can't get around it. You can't run away. We need a miracle every day. See what I mean, though? And so it's kind of a lame-brained argument to say that, what we perceive as chaos here from a different perspective is order. Okay, but all the order from that old perspective is now chaos then. So what? You only have to think one more step, too. One more little step. It hurts me. But I guess it shouldn't because, like I just said myself, we're always going to be trapped in duality, and there's no reason to resent people for playing their role, I guess. But it explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there's no such thing as chance, that while on various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. The principle of gender. Gender isn't everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. Oh man, yeah, I started to talk about this earlier and just trailed off into something else, didn't I? That's fine, because here we are now. The principle of gender. The principle of gender suggests that the gender is manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him, or her. Within it, him, or her. Look at that, non-binary pronouns. Oh, man. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles and which are a prostitution of the general natural principle of gender. And this is a funny thing because now we have this weird new type of feminism that is not really a celebration of femininity. It's actually an eradication of it. Just as they're sort of emasculating masculinity. It's like they're trying to, they don't want really, I mean, to me, what makes a woman attractive as like a completely straight male, like I can't even tell if guys are attractive or not. Most of the time, in fact, when girls will say, like, he's so cute, and I'm like, really? How? It doesn't. I can't see it at all. And that has to do with this spectrum. But at any rate, it's almost people don't even want you to generalize and say that this is a masculine trait and this is a feminine trait. That, and I'm not even talking about cultural roles or whatever, like the housewife or whatever. Just the general, like the idea that like women are nurturing. But it goes beyond the human characteristics of male and female. We're talking about, space and potential is part of the feminine. Darkness, the mystery, the waters. And you can see this, like what happens when a woman becomes pregnant? She's full of water. When she is turned on, there is water. And water is associated with emotion. And it is the pull of gravity that causes the water to act. And the moon that is acting upon the water is also of feminine nature, whereas the sun is driving the life. It is giving little tiny particles of itself that go into things and keep them alive and give life. And, so this idea that it's wrong somehow to associate certain characteristics with gender is actually evil. It's another part of the agenda to completely detach people from their spirituality. And I've noticed that most women that go down like the ayahuasca route or whatever, they end up, being really sexually free and wearing, stuff that really makes them look good. And, so it does seem that there's a positive correlation between elevation of consciousness and this sort of embracing these values of, it's not traditional, we're not talking about conservative Republican housewife shit here. This is a whole different level of understanding and knowledge of what it means to have gender. Having said that, individual human beings do express masculine and feminine characteristics across an entire spectrum, and it doesn't have to do with whether you have a penis or a vagina. This is a very tricky subject, It's difficult because both sides have a point. And it's really just the extremists on both sides that kind of create all the conflict. Mental transmutation. Now we're getting into the crux of the apostrophe. Mind, as well as metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True hermetic transmutation is a mental art, the Kybalion. I love how it quotes from itself all the time. It'll have like a paragraph and then it's like me, quoted myself. I used to know this Rasta guy that would do that. He had like phrases and stuff and he would be like, as I would say, it always embarrassed me for him, dude, you're quoting yourself. You don't have to quote yourself. You just say shit. If you made it up, you just say it. You don't quote yourself. It was just so whacked out. Then I figured out he had hair extensions and his dreadlocks weren't real and it all started to make sense. Anyways, as we have stated, the Hermeticists were the original alchemists, the astrologers and psychologists. Hermes, having been the founder of these schools of thought. From astrology has grown modern astronomy. From alchemy has grown modern chemistry. From the mystic psychology has grown the modern psychology of the schools. I don't know if that's growth exactly. It's not. But it must not be supposed that the ancients were ignorant of that which the modern schools suppose to be their exclusive and special property. The records engraved on the stones of ancient Egypt show conclusively that the ancients had a full comprehensive knowledge of astronomy. The very building of the pyramids shows the connection between their design and the study of astronomical science. Now, that's a weird statement coming from 1912, whatever. But I'll give you guys a couple of examples of that proof, because he just makes the claim, but he doesn't substantiate it with anything. And by the way, if the Kybalion was perfect, we wouldn't be here. Like, none of this shit is perfect. And that's why we're here, because we have to take it further, you know. You have to, when the older ones drop the torch, pick it up, keep going. That's one of the problems with doctrinal religions. It is this way, and if you fucks with it, thou shalt die. Verily we must choppeth you up and stompeth you down, and maybe rent a nice French bomb to poof you out of existence, leaving your real estate right where it was, so we can build more temples in which to praise our God. Because he knows what he's doing. He wrote this book here, didn't he? And anyways, if he made us to be just like him, if we're dumb, then God is dumb, and maybe even a little ugly on the side. So the pyramids and shit, though, right? Earlier I talked about this, but some of you guys are new, so I'll do it again. It's crazy as hell, so it's worth it. And this just happened today that I was reading this Masonic tome over here, Morals and Dogma. And we're in my Patreon, which you should all join. We're working on degree 27, working through it, almost done. And one of the things he mentioned was that Apollo, the sun god, the light bearer, music, magic, that he was also considered the liberator of elements. Think about that. When the sun swells up and swallows the earth, all of the elemental constituents, the carbon and everything, it will separate and come back into its individual molecules. Most of them we've destroyed. The carbon will be a little bit harder to get rid of, but still it's true that the first thing that will happen before it all is destroyed is that it will separate again. How in the fuck were the ancient Greeks knowing this? How? 2,000 years ago, and they're talking about the sun separating the elements again. I mean, you know, and what I want to know is how I've been trying to find like straight world people that are related to these kind of thinking, but in a straight world field, to come on and talk to me about this, so I can be like, what about this motherfucker? What do you got to say about that? You know, and they're not going to do it. Nobody will do it. I don't know why. Honestly, I would like to know what they think. And I'm sure, oh, well, it's just a coincidence, you know. Just, come on, man. And if it was just that, okay. But the fact that, you know, Mercury is the closest to gold, knock a proton off its gold, and the planet Mercury is right next to the sun, and there was nobody that could have orchestrated that. You know, we have a bunch of this shit at this point, and there's no way to get around it. Saturn, the sixth fucking planet from the sun, has got a hexagram on the top all of a sudden. It just formed a few years ago. A hexagonal storm or something. It's the sixth planet from the sun. The morning star, Venus, draws a pentagram every 8 years. 8 being the number of the morning star. So, I mean, and then there's the best evidence for advanced technology in ancient Egypt is probably the melted staircases. No one talks about this, but a few years ago I had this vision of a bunch of electromagnetic energy coming up through the capstone and tapping into the field, and it was being used to manipulate evolution and consciousness on the entire planet. And a few months ago, I found out that the stone stairs around the area where this would have been happening were melted, and I've seen pictures of it. It's like running down the rock. It's like running down and then cooled again. And scientists have said that the only thing that could have done that is EMF or nuclear energy. So that's wild, right? I mean, let's see, here's another one. And this This, I talk about this a lot, so for those of you that are always watching, excuse me, but for the redundancy, but this is extremely important because this is, I don't know how a skeptic could battle against this. The argument about the coordinates of the pyramid and the speed of light, if it was just that dimension, or that, I guess it's just that element, right? Then okay, ridiculously insane coincidence, especially considering that the mysteries that were practiced by the Egyptians are focused on light. So the speed of light, but okay, still a coincidence, I gotcha. What about the base of it and the height, and it's in the whole fucking shape, basically. So, we're getting to a pretty high degree of improbability for coincidence. But the argument that the Egyptians did not use miles per hour and they did not use our longitude and latitude, they didn't use that. That's the point. They did not do that deliberately. They were not thinking about miles per hour, and they were not thinking about latitude and longitude. But they were thinking about light. And they understood the velocity of a photon in the same way that we do. So when we make these measurements, it's the same by our standards as it is by theirs because it's the same fucking thing, That's part of the answer. And the other thing is that there are higher orders of symmetry that are integrated throughout all of the substrata of phenomenology. And so it doesn't have to be conscious. The universal mind can work across time, across cultures, and so that is one of those breadcrumbs. I call it the invisible thread that I've been following and swallowing following and swallowing and wallowing. Oh, my back's getting a little bit sore. It's signs, symbols, hints, clues, writings on the wall, and the rest is up to you. Okay, where are we at? What time is it? 10:22. Ow. So yeah, the pyramid thing. Nor were they ignorant of chemistry, for the fragments of the ancient writings show that they were acquainted with the chemical properties of things. In fact, the ancient theories regarding physics are being slowly verified by the latest discoveries of modern science. Science is always rediscovering old scraps of magical wisdom and making a great fuss about its cleverness. Notably, those relating to the constitution of matter. Nor must it be supposed that they were ignorant of the so-called modern discoveries in psychology. On the contrary, the Egyptians were especially skilled in the science of psychology, particularly in the branches that the modern schools ignore, but which nevertheless are being uncovered under the name of psychic science, which is perplexing the psychologists of today and making them reluctantly admit that there may be something in it after all. I haven't seen much of that myself. The truth is that beneath the material chemistry, astronomy, and psychology, that is the psychology in the phase of brain action, the scientists possessed a knowledge of transcendental astronomy called astrology, of transcendental chemistry called alchemy, of transcendental psychology called mysticism. They possessed the inner knowledge as well as the outer knowledge, the latter alone being possessed by modern scientists. Among the many secret branches of knowledge possessed by the Hermeticists was that known as mental transmutation, which forms the subject matter of this lesson. I had something to say about something. Oh, inner knowledge and outer knowledge. I think that there is a little bit of insight into the nature of synchronicity. And this is also why the secret societies are made with an outer order and an inner order. Because everything that you do, if you want it to be done well, it must be done without will. And you are trying to create a microcosmic model of the macrocosm, and that is why bands like Tool, put Fibonacci sequence in the music and stuff, because they know that they are almost supercharging it with, like, elevating it to a more, it's more powerful and it's more real. It's almost like a functional model of the universe instead of just a song or whatever, or at least a part of that universe. And then with the synchronicity thing, Jung's theory was basically that when you start to make the subconscious conscious, these coincidences start to happen. And so, that kind of bothers me a little bit, because in terms of understanding, because it's like, how are we going to just trigger some structural thing? Like when I had that ruler with 2 11s on it, while my girlfriend was asking me about what 11 was about and all that, that sort of stuff, where there's a physical object that's not right. And we're still bound to natural laws. Impossible things can't happen. So it's a little bit difficult to understand how these things could manifest like that, until I realized that there are higher orders of symmetry. And so when you create this bridge between the conscious and subconscious, you have created a more of a homeostasis. And then so the symmetry extends from your internal being to your external being. Your internal being you could sort of think of it as the subconscious and conscious, but now the subconscious is out of you, outside, and the conscious is inside of you. So, but there's a symmetry, and that's why these things happen. So mental transmutation means the art of changing and transforming mental states, forms, and conditions into others. So you may see that mental transmutation is the art of mental chemistry, if you like the term, a form of practical mystic psychology. But this means far more than appears on the surface. Transmutation, alchemy, or chemistry on the mental plane is important enough in its effects to be sure. And if the art stopped there, it would still be one of the most important branches of study to man. But this is only the beginning. The first of the 7 Hermetic principles is the principle of mentalism, the axiom of which is the all is mind, the universe is mental, which means the underlying reality of the universe is mind and the universe itself is mental, that is, existing in the mind of the all. We shall consider this principle in succeeding lessons, but let us see the effect of the principle if we assume it to be true. And, the big question to ask here, the really important thing, is hitting the like button and sharing the videos and joining my Patreon or sending support via one of the options in the chat. And, but okay, so the all is mind. So, a lot of people will tell you that if you believe it is so, and if I say to you, okay, well then believe with all your heart, close your eyes, believe with all your heart that this isn't going to hurt you. That's not what it means to say that the all is mind, obviously. So we have to have an acute awareness of what the limitations are, and also what the potential uses are. And it's a sticky slope. It may not sound like it, but if you really get the ball rolling with this stuff, and you find yourself down at the bottom of the rabbit hole, drinking mushroom tea laced with opium with Alice and the bunny rabbit and shit, it can make life a bit murky. And so what does it mean when we say the all is mind? Do we mean that it's actually that brick right there is just my brain? Like, is the idea that I'm generating it, or it's being collectively generated? And what is the extent? I can change my mind, but I can't change those bricks unless I go out and get a tool and smash the shit out of those bricks with the sledgehammer. And that kind of defies the idea that there's this ability to provoke physical changes with mind. And anything that's connected to mind, I can move matter with my mind. We don't think too much about that, but this is an act of magic. So when the Buddha said the all is mind, he was more meaning that your perception is your reality, not that the reality is your perception. People talk about how we all have different realities and the rules aren't necessarily the same for all of us. It is true that everyone I've ever known has told me, that the way my sort of rabbit hole world works is not normal. So I have to admit that, my own experience kind of suggests that that's true. At the same time, if in your reality tunnel, you believe that you cannot be killed by a dump truck and you jump out in front of one, you're going to die. So, we have to really, when we find an idea attractive, you really have to be willing to evaluate it no matter how much you like it in terms of the actual light of day. And that's whenever I hold space for ceremony for ayahuasca, I always say, I ask to shine the light in the places where we cannot or will not look. And that's one of the real true key things. People are having a really hard time seeking truth instead of looking for comfort. And I think a lot of times people think that I'm kind of being a negative troll because, I say these things. But the reality is that if you pursue falsehood, it's going to be a waste of time. And it may be minor trouble, it may be medium trouble, it may be major trouble, it may be terminal trouble. But all falsehood is evil, all of it, to some degree. So that's why, it's so important that we have the courage and the wisdom and the commitment and the objectivity to, really objectively assess things and make sure that when we integrate ideas and beliefs, well, you should never have beliefs. Belief is the death of intelligence. But, you might lean towards something rather than something else. That we have really vetted this shit, make sure it all tracks. But the Hermetic teaching does not imply a real duality. The all is one. The two aspects are merely aspects of manifestation. The teaching is that the masculine principle manifested by the all stands in a way apart from the actual mental creation of the universe. It projects its will toward the feminine principle, which may be called nature, whereupon the latter begins the actual work of the evolution of the universe from simple centers of activity onto man, and then on still higher, all according to the well-established and firmly enforced laws of nature. If you prefer the old figures of thought, you may find of the masculine principle as God, the Father, and of the feminine principle as nature, the universal mother from whose womb all things have been born. This is more than a mere poetic figure of speech. It is an idea of the actual process of the creation of the universe. But always remember that the all is but one, and that in its infinite mind, the universe is generated, created, and exists. And again, there's a couple of spots there that I kind of take issue with. It's not really true that there is one, and that is a paradox-free unity. It's not true. 0 equals 2. Which means that there was an original nothingness, right? And so there is a one, but it's none. The only one is none. Because as soon as you have nothingness and you have anything else, you have two things. So the universe did not go from 1 to 2 or from 0 to 1. It went from 0 to 2. And the whole understanding of the dualistic nature of the universe and the reason that paradox is imbued into all of it is expressed in that understanding that the only possible unity is nothingness. There's no such thing as oneness, except that there is noneness. So, that's important. If you prefer the old figures of thought, you may think of the masculine principle as God, the Father, and of the feminine principle as nature, the universal mother, from whose womb all things have been born. This is more than a mere poetic figure of speech. It is an idea of the actual processes of the creation of the universe. But always remember that the all is but one, and that in its infinite mind, the universe is generated, created, and exists. It may help you to get the proper idea if you will apply the law of correspondence to yourself and your own mind. You know that the part of you, which you call I, in a sense stands apart and witnesses the creation of mental images in your own mind. The part of your mind in which the mental generation is accomplished may be called the me, in distinction from the I, which stands apart and witnesses, and examines the thoughts, ideas, and images of the me, as above, so below. Remember, and the phenomena of one plane may be employed to solve the riddles of higher or lower planes. And again, that goes back to that. Remember earlier I was saying that I feel like the key to finding the theory of everything in physics is the time dilation, right? So time changes at different speeds, but if it's true that space and time are one thing, then it should also change at different scales of, and it does, I think, because when you do experiments in a particle acceleration chamber, you might do 500 billion of them because it only takes, 100,000th of a nanosecond to do each one. And that is another place where there's paradox, right? Because if it's true that there is an exception to every rule, which is true, these things, even though they 499 billion times in a row, the experiment is the same, you get one different result. So there's always an exception to every rule. A macro level example of that is if I ran into that brick wall for the next 100 billion years, eventually I would hit it at just the right moment that all of our particles in both the wall and me, or I guess just one or the other, were not there at that moment. And so, you would go through it with no resistance. But what I was saying is that if you shrink down to the size that you would be relative to the Earth, to the nucleus of an atom, the electrons would blink in and out of existence as slowly as the stars do in the macro universe. And that, when he talks about how the riddles of one plane can be solved by understanding a different plane, as above, so below, that's an illustration of that I think works pretty well. Is it any wonder that you, the child, feel that instinctive reverence for the all, which feeling we call religion? I don't. That respect and reverence for the father mind. Is it any wonder that when you consider the works of wonders of nature, you are overcome with a mighty feeling which has its roots way down in your inmost being? It is the mother mind that you are pressing close up to, like a babe to the titty. Do not make the mistake of supposing that the little world around you, the earth, which is a mere grain of dust in the universe, is the universe itself. There are millions upon millions and millions of such earths and greater, and there are millions and millions and millions of such universes in existence within the infinite mind of the all. And even in our little solar system, there are regions and planes of life far higher than ours, and being compared to which we are earthbound mortals, are as the slimy life forms that dwell on the ocean's bed when compared to man. There are beings with powers and attributes higher than man has ever dreamed of, the gods possessing. And yet, those beings were once as you and still lower, and you will be even as they and still higher in time. For such is the destiny of man, as reported by the illumined. Of course, there's a little bit of a contradiction there. He's saying that these gods have powers beyond any that we have imagined. Well, what are you not human then, dude? You're telling us you've seen it, so I guess you've at least imagined it. And then that tendency to sort of, prop his stuff up on, this came from higher beings. That always kind of cringy. Death is not real, even in the relative sense. This is one of the reasons that we know Christianity is not true. Because, if the truth can be told to be if the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. Generally, it's getting harder. It used to be that if I approached someone with this kind of thinking, and they were at all open-minded, I would usually just get this wide-eyed look, and they would say, it's like you're reminding me of something, because we all have all the information stored in every cell in our body and beyond in the zero-point field and everything. So it's one of the ways that I know that the propaganda machine has been turned up so much, it's gotten way more difficult to communicate and get people to listen to anything other than what they already think. Like the indoctrination and propaganda has congealed into something nearly impenetrable. And yet these beings were once as you. We just went through that. And death is not real, even in the relative sense. This is another thing I have issue with. We can say it's likely not real. That's it. You cannot say that. You're not dead. Those who speak do not know, and those who know do not speak. Period. Even reincarnation is impossible to prove because there is genetic memory. No information is lost at the quantum level, which suggests that we could potentially have access to all of the life and information and everything that's ever happened in the 0-point field. There is genetic memory, so if you're related to someone, you could remember things from their lives. I've done that to my mother in a mind blow. It was nuts, man. Freaked her out. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. The point is that you can't produce evidence for it, because no matter what, there's an alternate explanation for everything. So when somebody makes those kind of like assertions, like we are eternal, and they just are certain of it, damn, it's too bad, man. You're stuck. You can't do that. You can't. Your development will stop if you accept a belief and you're like, that's a belief. No, nope. You must remain flexible. Belief is the death of intelligence. There will be no more evolution. There will be no more growth until you discard the beliefs and continue on with this process, of exploring potentials. But at any rate, death is not real, even in the relative sense. It is but birth to a new life, and you shall go on and on and on to higher and still higher planes of life, for eons upon eons of time. The universe is your home, and you shall explore its farthest recesses before the end of time. You are dwelling in the infinite mind of the all, and your possibilities and opportunities are infinite, both in time and space. But at the end of the grand cycle of aeons, when the all shall draw back into itself all of its creations, you will go gladly, for you will then be able to know the whole truth of being at one with the all. Such is the report of the ill-mind ones. Stop it, bro. Such is the report of the ill-mind, those who have advanced well along the path. But in the meantime, rest calm and serene, smoke a blunt, and get down. Real trap shit. You are safe and protected by the infinite power of the Father and Mother Mind. The Father and Mother Mind. It's the mind is the... I don't know why you said that. Yeah, and by the way, you guys, don't forget, I'm always down to AMA. I'm just, basically, I know, like, I haven't been able to sleep for a while, and it's going to be a minute, so I might as well just stay up. I kind of want to relaunch the stream, though, and see if we can get a bigger audience again, because we had a ton of people. Maybe, I don't know what I have to do to, like, recapture that the audience we had before. Okay, so... The divine paradox, and this is where things get sticky for a lot of people. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagine that they may defy its laws. Such are vain and presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. The truly wise, knowing the nature of their universe, use law against laws. By the way, I don't know if he got that from this or vice versa, but one of Crowley's best books is called By Wisdom or Folly. And he just said the element by reason of their folly. I don't know if it's connected. The higher against the lower. Oh, the truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe, use law against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. So, as many of you know, I just unexpectedly split up my partner of 6 years. She was the only human that I have ever been close to. True fact. The only human. When my dog died, I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and wailed. I was a gun-toting outlaw. You know what I mean? I cried like a little girl in front of all the other outlaws. Because we were working on a pot farm, and, my mom's funeral, I did not shed a tear. If you knew the whole story, it would make more sense to you, but I didn't, not one. I haven't spoken to my brother in 20 years. I didn't know my father. I've always been very uninclined to socialize. So, for 6 years, we were together every day. We lived with indigenous people in the jungles. We experienced magic. We went on tour with Dead and Company. We stayed with Bob Dylan's ex-wife for a while. Ruth from one of his songs, Memphis, stuck in Memphis again with the honky tonk, or what? Stuck inside of Memphis with the Mobile blues again. But then he says, Ruth in her honky-tonk saloon, and I was literally sitting next to the Ruth from the song that I used to sing when I was like 21, driving around in my car in the mountains, and I was playing it. When I got to the line about Ruth, I just choked on it, and I looked up at her, and it really hit me. Like, it's like being in a room with like a Shakespeare character or something, you know? And, so many adventures, and suddenly she's just gone, and my son as well. So it's, I have two choices. I can let it drag me down like a stone or lift me up like a child full of light and innocence. Let the waters kiss, crush, and transmutate these leaden grudges and traumas into gold. And I would be consumed if I did not choose to let it go. And so, whereas I have this tremendous heartache and shock and confusion and sense of loss and all of this other stuff, I am increasing my exercise regimen. I am learning AI faster and trying to integrate it into my stuff so I can make more money online. I'm staying up late at night learning higher mathematics. I am everything that I should have been doing all this time, I'm suddenly doing it. So the art of mental alchemy in this case is that I am turning all of this pain and horror, really, into fuel to catalyze change, and that's really the trick, And a long time ago, when the people that were asking me about how to transmute fear, I should have talked about this then, I guess. But another thing that I'll say about this, and this is a little bit different from transmutation, but during what I call the Phoenix process, where I was like really rapidly developing, and this shit was like, it was like being in a science fiction movie or something. It was that insane. And unlike a lot of these experiences for other people, it was like the only time in my life I actually did have kind of a large group of friends, and whatever was happening didn't care if they saw it. So I had all these witnesses all the time, which was really important, because I would have just thought I'd lost my fucking mind, but everybody was all just bug-eyed all the time. And so during this process, one of the things that I had to do was go out into the desert. I was living in Colorado, this big adobe house with heated floors and stuff. It was gangster. And so I had this voice in my head. I've always had it since I was a child. It tells me what to do. It's always right. I don't always listen, almost never, actually, to be perfectly honest, trying to get better about that. But during this period, I did listen, though, and all kinds of amazing shit happened. So now I'm really like, okay, I'm still alive. Maybe I can get back into that modality. But I didn't know why yet. But I had this Macy's smoking jacket that I would put on and go outside at exactly midnight, but I didn't look at the clock. Eventually I looked at the clock and I realized that I had been doing it at midnight every night. And it wasn't really telling me exactly what to do or anything. I just kind of knew. So I've never liked heights because you can fall, and I get vertigo around edges, I guess. So I scaled a cliff in the dark, and it was a high one. And so I'm over that now. And again, that's transmutation of fear into courage. And again, the principles of the Kybalion apply completely. because fear and courage are polarities of the same thing. And even the paradox is present in that. And so every night this continued for 7 days. All of these periods were 7 days long. And so I guess the next one, I almost stepped on a rattlesnake, and my dog was right beside me. And I jumped, like, they say white men can't jump. Trust me, it's not true. I jumped like 20 feet straight up, like, it blew my mind while it was happening. You know what I mean? Like, I was fully aware that I had just launched myself like an ungodly distance, up and away. And my dog was, he was a little pit bull, and he was going absolutely batshit trying to kill this rattlesnake. Eventually, this rattlesnake would bite him. Not that one, but a different one did bite him. So I instantly calmed my energy, and the snake's rattle stopped in perfect synchronization with me calming my energy. Like, bzzz, and my dog just stopped. As soon as that energy, calmed, all the animals just stopped. And so again, we're transmitting fear, in this case, into another type of energy, which is kind of no energy, just a calm state. And this went on for 7 days and cultivated with an interaction with a cop. And this is where it got like really weird, because there were no cops out there. And I had gone out into the park with a friend of mine who was struggling with his sexuality. And I recognized him to be the reincarnation of Victor Newberg, who had done this ritual with Crowley out in the desert. So while we were walking out there, I started asking him all these questions that only Victor Newberg would know the answer to, and he hadn't studied this stuff. He didn't hesitate to answer all of it. It was nuts, man. It's like, you remember when we were out in the desert in the Sahara? Was there any kind of like geological feature around us? And he's like, yeah, really sharp, like yellow sandstone, almost like spires that kind of went up, and there were some bushes and a cliff and stuff, and it's described the bird and everything, and a whole bunch of stuff. So that was weird. And then we went out to the field, and I started telling him as we were leaving that I had been facing a different fear every night for 6 days. And I was like, so this is the 7th day. So something's going to happen. And I was like, the only thing I haven't really confronted is my fear of cops. As soon as the word cop came out of my mouth, blue and red lights. And I was like, what the fuck? And remember this. If a cop lights you up when you're doing nothing wrong, they intend to fuck with you, okay? So predicating all this with that, it's like... But I got the message immediately. I was like, I have to prove to him that what I'm saying is true. That if you fear something, if you absolutely have no fear, it has to be absolute. Absolutely no fear. It cannot harm you. So, and remember, chaos supersedes these laws. So it can never be more than 99.9999999% certain. But, it can be pretty solid. But you have to believe it. And so I went up to the cop's window and leaned in, like way too far, and I almost started going off on him right away, telling him I was committing all kinds of felonies and pointing to my house down there. I was like, there's all kinds of more felonies down there, all it's pot, and I've got DMT in my pocket. And he's like, I never heard of it. And I was like, what's a felony? And he's like, well, I don't care what you do in your own home. And I'm like, I'm not in my home. I'm out here in the streets. And I just leaned into your fucking window. And I look and I see my friend put his hands behind his head just because he's just waiting for the handcuffs. And I just started getting bolder and bolder and bolder and bolder and bolder. Like I suggested that I might grab his gun or something, and and he eventually Ty crawled under his truck, just because he's like, okay, if he's gonna Jedi mind fuck the cop, so am I. So I'm looking at the cop, and he goes, "Did your friend just crawl under my truck?" And I'm like, "I need you right here, dude. This is important, And so I keep just grilling him and shit. And the last thing he said to me was, "Cop is just a symbol. Can I go?" And I was like, "Did you just ask me if you can leave?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got a family at home. I want to get out of here." I was like, all right. And Ty got out from under the car, and we went home. And it was insane, though, that I just said that, and then blue and red lights for no reason. And then the cop, what did he do that for? Why did he light us up? It is possible that I just encountered like the chillest cop on the face of the earth and got really lucky. But in the context of everything that was happening, I don't think that's And it really has stuck with me. I mean, those of you that know my lifestyle, obviously I'm not too worried about shit. You know what I mean? Maybe it helps I've never had security in my entire life, so I'm not really I don't know what that is, so how can I be nostalgic for it or whatever? But I think those kind of experiences pretty goddamn transformative. I wouldn't recommend taking it as far as I have, unless you're really sure. You'll know, I guess. Okay, so this is the paradox of the universe resulting from the principle of polarity, which manifests when the all begins to create. Hearken it, for it points the difference between half wisdom and wisdom. Except that all of these things are true and false, and it is both true and false to say that they are true and false. So there is no wisdom if there's half wisdom. There's half wisdom and wisdom half or something, but I don't dig that, the way he phrased that. While the infinite all, the universe, its laws, its powers, its life, its phenomena, are all things witnessed in the state of meditation or dream, yet to all that is finite, the universe must be treated as real, and life, and action, and thought must be based thereupon accordingly, although with an ever understanding of the higher truth, each according to its own plane and laws. Were the all to imagine that the universe were indeed reality, then woe to the universe, for there would be then no escape from the lower to the higher, divine word. Then would the universe become a fixity, and progress would become impossible. And if man, owing to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it so become for him, and like a sleepwalker, he stumbles over, around, and around in a circle, making no progress, and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling, bruised, and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. Keep your mind ever on the star, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall into the mire by reason of your upward gaze. Remember the divine paradox, that while the universe is not, still it is. And, the people that accuse us of just gobbledygook word salad, you can prove this. They proved it to us, actually. I mean, I spent most of my life thinking I think all of this stuff is correct, but it wasn't until somebody invented an electron microscope that I knew there's nothing there, and yet there is a table. Matter is 99% empty space. This table, this computer, me, camera, all of it, is just light in a standing wave. But then when you really go in there, what is light? Well, it's a photon. But what makes up a photon? Electromagnetic energy. Okay, what is that? The ability to do work. What do you mean? Well, it's not a substance, it's an activity. So it's nothing. Yes. But it is. Yes. So it isn't, it's not. Yes. But mysticism is word salad. You know what I mean? We got him up against the wall at this point, man. It's not really possible to dismiss this kind of stuff anymore. Remember always the two poles of truth, the absolute and the relative. Beware of half-truths. In fact, that paradoxical thing, and how it's imbued in everything, it started with that original fact that the only possible unity is nothingness. Because as soon as you have a thought, an object, an energy, anything but nothingness, you have two things, right? So the only possible one is nothing, but it is something, so it's there. So it is and it is not. So even going all the way back to the moment of creation, these truths are always universally true. It's crazy shit, man. The universe is a dynamic net zero. And it's full of paradoxes. There's actually zeros of different orders of magnitude. What the fuck is that? More nothing? I got a bigger bag of nothing, or you can get you want a little bag of nothing or a big bag of nothing? What hermeticists know as the law. See, and here he goes saying, beware of half-truths. One chapter ago, you said there were only half-truths. So what is this, And again, I'm just pointing this out. Nothing is to be followed dogmatically, and you have to watch for that kind of stuff. Because it kind of reminds you have to look for the holes and flaws and stuff and figure out a solution. how to at least to think about it so that there are not unresolvable contradictions that just can't work. The Hermetic writings are filled with references to the appearance of the paradox and the consideration of the problems of life and being. The teachers are constantly warning their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question. And their warnings are particularly directed at problems of the absolute and the relative, which perplex all students of philosophy and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of half-truth, which is the only kind of truth there is. Within this and view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. The first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the all is that the universe and all that it contains is merely illusion. Okay, now I will give you a mathematical example of, your success will be up roof, grasshopper. So I'll give you a mathematical model or example, functional model of how you can see that the all is in the all, that the infinite is contained in zero. What happens if you divide a number by zero? So zero contains infinity then. And even when you look at the glyph of zero, where you have a line going around infinitely, and in the center you have nothing. So even the glyph that we have created symbolizes infinity, nothingness. You can divide any number infinitely, and you'll just get a longer and longer and longer string of decimal points. So the all is in the all. And it is truly a holographic universe. Whether the universe be created of matter, or whether it be a mental creation in the mind of the all, it is unsubstantial, non-enduring, and a thing of time, space, and change. We want you to realize this fact thoroughly before you pass judgment on the Hermetic conception of the mental universe. That reminded me of something too. Well, maybe it'll come back to me. But the absolute point of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is the relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them, while relative truth is things as the highest reason of man understands them. And so while the universe must be unreal, and so while to the all, the universe must be unreal and illusionary, a mere dream or result of meditation, nevertheless, to the finite minds forming a part of that universe and viewing it through mortal faculties, the universe is very real indeed and must be so considered. In recognizing the absolute view, we must not take the mistake of ignoring or denying the facts and phenomena of the universe as they present themselves to our mortal faculties. We are not the all. To take familiar illustration, we all recognize the fact that matter exists to our senses. We will fare badly if we do not. And yet, even our finite minds understand the scientific dictum that there's no such thing as matter from a scientific point of view. That which we call matter is held to be merely an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force called electrons and ions, vibrating and in constant circular motion. That's not true. They don't vibrate and they're not going in a circular motion. They are blinking in and out of existence. And what I would like to know about that is, how do we know when an electron blinks out of existence that it's the same one that we see when we see the one blink back? Did they tag its fucking ear or something? Like, that's weird, I mean, I guess I can accept that it's blinking in and out of existence, but how do you know it's not just formulating a new one? Doesn't really matter much. Well, it kind of does, because it could be proof that there's two worlds and that energy in one state exists on this plane, switches, comes back, switches again, comes back. And actually, that could solve a huge issue that I've always had trying to think about reincarnation, because it's like, okay, so I die right here on the floor, and then I'm reborn in Russia to some woman somewhere. How the hell did I get in who? In the dude's sperm sac? Is that where it is? Or is it in the female? Because my understanding is that their genetics are going to intermingle. So how am I the same being with different DNA? That's not real. So, you know what I mean? It's like, this shit doesn't work very well. But if it's more like flipping when you die to another side and flipping back, and you're like still in the same place where your physical body died, it's getting a little bit closer to something I can actually accept, you know. Well, yeah, Jonah, I appreciate that, but it's also a coping mechanism, you know. And I have to make a tremendous amount of money to like get them out of the country and get an apartment maybe. No, her sister's going to put her up, so. But, you know, I have to take care of them, so I make a little bit of money streaming, and right now, that's all I can do is just work. And at least it's good work, you know. My mom always used to tell me that I would never be able to monetize psychedelics and mysticism and shit. It's like, bitch, you don't know me. It's true, though. I hated that so much, and I believed her for a long time, you know. Atoms, mirrored group of force. That's crazy. I didn't realize they knew this much about physics in 1900, I mean. That's crazy. And they say that actually nothing new has come up in physics in like 70 years or something. That they have all these ideas, but there's no way to experimentally like evaluate them, a lot of it. So supposedly the string theorists have known they were full of shit for like 30 years, and they just have been able to make money off of it. And so like Brian Greene and like that Japanese guy, you know, all these string theorists, they know that they're just full of shit. That some physicist was on Rogan or something, he said that the other day. He's like, these guys are lying through their teeth. They know it's not true. They know it's not real. They've known it for 30 years. They just have written books and shit, and they would lose so much face if they all of a sudden were like, yeah, I guess none of it was true. Fucking what a world, man. And at best, if it were not by reason of our mind, we would not know the foot or stone at all. Oh, yeah, okay. We kick a stone, we know it's real. That's... and what degree of reality is in the mental images is created by the mind of the infinite and or by our own. I think that's also pretty easy to figure out, you know, that's the mind of the infinite, and here's, you know, let's see. Yeah, so we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws and endeavor to use them to the best effect in our upward progress through life. As we travel from plane to plane of being, the laws of the universe are none the less iron laws because of the mental nature. All except the all are bound to them. Even the all is bound to them. That's why you can't ask for miracles that are impossible. Not even, let's say there is a conscious God. If you were to use but the force of a feather to destabilize even a part of one of the laws of the universe, the whole thing would come apart. So that's why a lot of people end up atheists, because if you try to ask God to do something impossible, and that's your metric for whether or not there's a God, you know, a God would be able to do anything, right? No, it cannot suspend the laws of nature. Cannot do that. That's why it doesn't. That's why it never happens. So what he's saying here, though, is that an adept, and remember, there are different types of adepts. A guy that can engineer a Boeing 747 is an adept. You know, and what is he really doing? A magician is a person that causes change to occur in conformity with will. And the actions of this magician will appear as turning over the fundamental laws of creation to the profane. But what is he really doing? He's using the laws of nature to make a, 40-ton chunk of metal fly through the air. He does that by using the laws, but the appearance is that he has broken the laws. And so that is a really crucial and fundamental thing to understand about how magic actually works. In fact, if I have a magical intention to write a book, I must call forth spirits, printers, publishers, marketing people. I must take a magical weapon, a pen, and paper, and I must write incantations and spells, these sentences, in the language of the people I wish to instruct. And then I must call forth printing presses and, thus the printing and distribution of the book is an act of magic, where I have caused change to occur in conformity with my will. That's the reality of it. And I'm not saying that you can't increase your capacity for success and elevate the content of your art through these portals to higher states of mind. Obviously, it has an effect. But if you think you're going to sit around and twiddle your fingers and fill your bank account up, you're fucking stupid. Sorry. That's not how it works. Basically, like, you can set all the energy into motion, but you must have conduits in the same way that your toilet needs pipes for things to flow through, and your electronics need wires to conduct the electricity. If you wish to manifest your will, you must make sure that there are conduits that are capable and appropriate for the distribution of your will and the actualization of it in accordance with what is possible as dictated by the laws of nature. The stream is lagging? Is everyone experiencing that, or is it just... Oh, yeah, it says I have poor... How can I have a poor connection? I have an Ethernet cable and 50 Mbps fucking upload speed. You only need 10. I don't understand. Evil spirits, dude. To know it otherwise, by actual experience, we must know the all itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach, the more apparent becomes the illusory nature of finite things. But not until the all finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws. It is my will that my computer and internet should cooperate with me, and it apparently doesn't care what my will is right now. Morning. No lag? Oh, wow, Russell, you're still there? Damn, man, you guys are hanging tough tonight. I just wish I could see this. I don't understand what's happening. The laws of nature are acting against me tonight. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws and endeavor to use them to the best effect in our upward progression through life as we travel from plane to plane of being. I read that already. And the example was that, you use the laws to transcend them. Don't expect to overrule them. So do not feel insecure or afraid. We are all held firmly in the infinite mind of the all. And there is naught to hurt us or for us to fear. It's good to think that way. There is no power outside of the all to affect us, so we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in this realization when once attained, that calm and peaceful do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep. Fucking Kybalion's got bars too. Resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of the infinite mind, which is the all in the all. Indeed do we live and move and have our being. Matter is nonetheless matter to us while we dwell on the plane of matter, although we know it to be merely an aggregation of electrons or particles of force that do not even exist, vibrating rapidly and gyrating around each other as if they were something when they are actually nothing. In the formation of atoms, the atoms in turn vibrating and gyrating, forming molecules. So basically, the nothingness is fucking the nothingness and making somethingness that's also still nothingness. You are your parents, but you're not your parents. in turn form larger masses of matter, nor does matter become less matter when we follow the injury still further. Inquiry, not injury, inquiry. One, and the manifestation of the mind of the all, and like all else in the universe, purely mental in its nature. While on the plane of matter, we must recognize its phenomena. We may control matter, as all masters of higher or lesser degree do, but we do so by applying the higher forces. We commit a folly when we attempt to deny the existence of matter in the relative aspect. We may deny its mastery over us, and rightly so, but we should not attempt to ignore it in its relative aspect, at least so long as we dwell upon its plane. Nor do the laws of nature become less constant or effective when we know them, otherwise to be merely mental creations. They are all in full effect on the various planes. We overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only. But we cannot escape law or rise above it entirely. Nothing but the all can escape law, and that's not even true. That because the all, and you know why he does that sometimes? He's older than us, like way older. And so he was more indoctrinated, you know. He couldn't let go of the idea that there's like this all-powerful God. And it's like not consistent with any of this, you know. And you really shouldn't, this isn't proper scientific illuminism, because you really shouldn't make assertions that you have no evidence for at all. Like, without specifying every time you open your mouth that this may not be true, you know. What's up, Illuminastic Mind? Sister channel, you guys. I'm going to do a live stream with her in a few days, and so do follow her as well, please. And we're trying to get around the demonetization and the, you know, that shit where they don't push me very much. Deprioritization. It's got nothing to do with writing a line between spirituality and nihilism. It's the truth, and it's demonstrable, you know. And we're not writing a line. The reality is that there's obviously something that's giving everything structure and symmetry and order, and there's some kind of consciousness. But if you zoom into matter with an electron microscope, there is nothing there. This isn't about nihilism or spirituality. It's about obvious, testable, discernible, provable truth. That's all. There's no nihilism in it. I mean, aren't you a little bit religious? That's who I would expect to get a response like that from. Somebody that is also still integrated with the demon Jesus and hasn't managed to eradicate their being with these parasitical entities quite yet. Being must bow to the law, all of it, including the all. The most advanced masters may require the powers usually attributed to the gods of men, and there are countless ranks of being in the great hierarchy of life, whose being and power transcends even that of the highest masters, among men to a degree unthinkable by mortals. And I hate when people say that too. There really is... Well, thank you for appreciating Moshe. It can be difficult at times. You know, like earlier today, I don't think you were here yet, we had like 500 people between the two streams, and the stream crashed. And I had to start over, and we never got anywhere near those numbers again. So stuff like that, you know, put all this effort into it, and then like finally starting to gain some ground, get some traction, crash. You know, it always happens. I swear to God, it's probably paranoid, but it's not just me. A lot of people think they're doing it to me on purpose. And it is a little bit weird that every time I get like a little bit of traction, something just breaks, you know. And some of you guys were there. I didn't touch a fucking thing. I didn't touch a button. I didn't move a cord. I didn't do anything. And the programs weren't even all the way crashed. Like they had frozen, but I could just, you know, and all of them at once. Like, I don't know. So that if even those highest beings, whose powers exceed even those attributed by men of their gods, if even those are bound by and are subservient to law, then imagine the presumption of mortal man, of our race and greed, when he dares to consider the laws of nature as unreal, visionary, and illusory, because he happens to be able to grasp the truth that the laws are mental in nature, and simple mental creations of the all. Those laws which the all intends to be governing laws are not to be defied or argued away. So long as the universe endures, will they endure, for the universe exists by virtue of these laws which form its framework and which hold it together. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, while explaining the true nature of the universe upon the principle that all is mental, does not change the scientific conceptions of the universe, life, or evolution. And so what he just kind of like hit on there a little bit, I don't know, maybe you haven't been watching Ethos, but we actually have given scientific, demonstrable, observable, mathematical proofs, all of the shit you're saying that we have not offered. I have definitely offered thoroughly for all of these concepts, every single one of them. It's not poetry in a book. You can confirm that there is nothing here with a microscope. That matter is empty space, that the universe is actually nothingness, and it is somethingness because there is a table here. But if you actually look with a very powerful microscope, there's nothing there. How is that just poetry from a book? How is the fact that zero, both the glyph with a line that goes around infinitely and then nothing in the center, is not a glyph of everything being nothing? And if you divide a number by zero, you get infinity, which means that infinity is contained in zero. So, dude, you're I mean, you do not track. You know what I mean? I don't know why you're saying this. And the as above, so below principle, I've given like 20 different like real world, observable, demonstrable examples of that. So maybe your stream is lagging too much and you're just missing all of the mathematical and observable proofs that I've offered. But I do that constantly. Offer these things, and I cannot put an electron microscope on your eye through my camera so that you can see it yourself. You have to go do it, but you can. No, I am showing. You're saying I'm not speaking, but I am showing. I am showing you the way. But if you want to go look at a table with an electron microscope and find out it's all empty space, you have to go do that. You know, I mean, there are limitations. I can't show you. What you want me to get out a calculator? You're not capable of using a calculator, so you can divide by zero and realize that infinity is in zero, so the all is in the all. You don't know how to use a calculator, or what? I don't understand what you're saying. I'm giving you demonstrable proof of all this stuff, way beyond any fucking priest is going to. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what you're saying right now. It just kind of feels like you're just trolling because you don't really have anything to say. Okay, well, Moshe, we got to talk about that double slit experiment. I brought this up earlier, but the idea that it's the observer that determines the outcome is not actually what the physicists were saying. That interpretation of what happened? That interpretation of the double slit law comes from a movie called What the Bleep that was actually complete nonsense, and the physicists were furious after it was over because they had edited together the things they were saying to make them say things they weren't saying. So, there's actually better proof that consciousness has some kind of role in the subatomic world in the fact that electrons know when they're being watched. That's actually a much better. I'm not saying that the double slit experiment that's not necessarily part of it, but it's the act of taking a measurement that causes the probability wave to collapse one way or the other. Of course, the argument beyond that is how are you going to take a measurement without consciousness? Without consciousness, who is going to measure? So it's still kind of true, but I always just feel like I should point that out, that the double slit experiment and that interpretation of it, most physicists don't, you got to read, you should watch the outtakes from that movie. And the physicists are furious, and they're explaining what it actually means versus what they tried to tell you it meant with cartoons and shit. Mr. Risen. I don't know if he's like saying I'm Mr. Jesus or like Mr. Risen, That's hilarious either way, man. I dig the name. And ethos, I'm not trying to be hard on you, man, but I did offer proofs and demonstrable things and measurable shit. And, I've given you the tools, but you have to go and actually do all that stuff. I can't do it through my camera. I don't know what you want from me, I can. I can tell you through the camera to get a calculator out. Go learn some trig and stuff, and you'll see some calculus. Where were we at with this craziness? Oh yeah, so long as the universe endures, these laws will endure. That's a problem for a lot of people, because myself included, when Terence McKenna was like, yo, in 2012, the fucking limitations on our consciousness are going to vaporize and we'll be able to think shit into existence. And he seemed so smart, and I believed him. I was like 15. Actually, Terence McKenna is the first person that I ever exchanged an email with in 1998. The first person I ever sent an email to, and the first person I ever got an email back from is Terence McKenna. But he lied his ass off. He faked his mathematics for the novelty theory, the quantum wave thing that he was doing. And that was a real shock, to realize that somebody of his caliber and psychedelic status could be that full of shit deliberately, He actually challenged the mathematical community to evaluate his equations, and the guy was like, not only are they wrong, they have been deliberately faked. And he wrote a paper called Autopsy of a Mathematical Theory. And Terence was alive when that happened too. But what I'm saying about this is that we all have this, many of us anyways, or the culture does, this idea of Jesus, 1,000 years of peace, heaven on earth, and we're going to enter the fifth dimension. And you better hope so, because otherwise all of these laws are going to remain constant and in full effect until the end of time. There's never going to be a fucking La La Land. There's never going to be a time when we're all sitting around doing lines of fucking fairy dust and huffing unicorn farts. It's not happening. We're not going to be fucking eating bowls of quartz crystals with fucking soy milk on them and shit, as our totally vegan diet. It's not happening. There's going to be good and evil and creation and destruction and war and peace and all of these opposites in perfectly equal distribution until the end of time, when the omega point happens and the light consumes itself and collapses back into singularity again. That's it. It may be that there are other dimensions and shit, but as far as I can tell, the only way you're getting there is to die. That's it, So, and I noticed that when I went on that little rant, we lost some viewers because people just can't, they don't want to hear that, He who speaks the truth has few friends. And the thing is, I'm not saying that we can't improve stuff, because we have this relative thing going on, right? So we cannot make it perfect. It's not intended to be perfect. All that is metaphor. So, in order to have definition, we must have shadow, and shadow is evil. It's the same thing. So, when we talk about the veil that separates worlds, it's about making the conceptualization an actualization, and there's a process of reversal. So these polarities always exist on one end or the other. I don't know if that was a good explanation, but that's the real truth. We can make things better by raising the floor, because it's all relative, but it's not going to just suddenly suspend duality because we've entered into the age of Aquarius or whatever. That's just silly. This is not a comic book. This is real life. L. Ron Hubbard did not write the script for the actual universe. The Hermetic teachings have no fault to find with Herbert Spencer's basic principle, which postulates the existence of an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. In fact, the Hermetics recognize in Spencer's philosophy the highest outside statement of the workings of the natural laws that have ever been promulgated, and they believe Spencer to have been a reincarnation of an ancient philosopher who dwelt in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago, and who later incarnated as Heraclitus, the Grecian philosopher who lived BC 500. And they regard his statement as the infinite and eternal energy as directly in the line of the Hermetic teachings, always with the addition of their own doctrine that his energy is the energy of the mind of the all. With the master key of the Hermetic philosophy, the student of Spencer will be able to unlock many doors, of the inner philosophical conceptions of the great English philosopher, whose works show the results of the preparations of his previous incarnations. His teachings regarding evolution and rhythm are in almost perfect agreement with the Hermetic teachings regarding the principle of rhythm. Now, there's a little bit of a red flag right here, because he's going into this like, this guy's shit is almost good because it's in line with our stuff. It's, a little bit culty there. So that's a mistake. I don't like that energy at all. And what it really means, it's not about Hermetic teachings. It's not about Luciferianism. It's not about Freemasonry. It's not about any of this stuff. It's the underlying truths, and these are the names of people, Hermes, that have discovered them and written them down. So it's not, he's kind of talking about it now as if it's like a man that invented a religious idea. That's not what this stuff is. It's a description of the actual phenomenology of the universe. So again, I blame that on the fact that he's coming from an older generation, and he had not fully exorcised the demons of cultural influence to the extent that you have to in order to really do this stuff well. So the student of Hermetics need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views regarding the universe. All he is asked to do is to grasp the underlying principle of the all is mind, the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. He will find that the other 6 of the 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge and will serve to bring out obscure points and to throw light in dark corners. This is not to be wondered at. When we realize the influence of the Hermetic thought on the early philosophers of Greece, upon whose foundations of thought the theories of modern science largely rest, the acceptance of the first Hermetic principles, especially mentalism, is the only great point of difference between modern science and Hermetic students. And science is gradually moving toward the Hermetic position, and it's groping in the dark for a way out of the labyrinth into which it has wandered in its search for reality. Weary with much wandering in the maze of phenomena, frightened by the inhospitable strangeness of the world, men have rushed into the systems prepared for them by the founders of religion and philosophy, as if rushing from a frightening and cold forest full of menacing animals into a well-lit, commodious house, and men have been burned alive at the stake for questioning the size of a window or the color of the front door. It is fear of the labyrinthine flux and the inhospitable strangeness of the world that... The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our students the fact that to all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomena are just as real as far as man is concerned as they would be under the hypothesis of materialism or energism. I got to turn my Riz on if I'm gonna get any energism going. Oh my God, what is it? I've never heard that term before. Energism. That's funky. Under any hypothesis, the universe and its outer aspects is changing, ever-flowing, and transitory, and therefore devoid of substantiality and reality. But note the other pole of the truth. Under any of the same hypothesis, we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial. There are shadows, but there is that which remains. With this difference, always, between the various hypotheses, that under the old views, mental power was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism, it becomes the greatest natural force. And this one difference revolutionizes life to those who understand the principle and its resulting laws and practice. So finally, students will grasp the advantage of mentalism and learn how to use and apply the laws resulting therefrom. But do not yield to the temptation which, as the Kybalion states, overcomes the half-wise and which causes them to be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things, the consequence being that they wander about like dream people dwelling in a world of ideas, ignoring the practical work and life of man, the end being that they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. That is at least partly adapted from hit the like button, join my Patreon. Yeah, later, buddy. My throat is kind of getting like... bit sore. How long have I been talking? Okay, this stream has been going for 2 hours and 38 minutes. The last stream went for 1 hour and 45 minutes. So, yeah, I have gone through 92 pages of the Kybalion with my own commentary as well in the stream so far. I better, when I wake up tomorrow, I better be paid. If I put in 6 hours of work tonight and make no money, I might have to delete the whole entire internet. In fact, I might even delete the earth. Did you guys know that I was actually voted Emperor of the Earth yesterday? I resigned immediately, though. The second they notified me, man, I was like, no. And the crazy thing is, the only person that voted for me was Kanye West, but apparently his vote carries as much weight as the rest of the human race. So, the true meaning of life is not known to men on this plane, if indeed to any but the highest authorities of our own intuitions teach us that we will make no mistake in living up to the best that is in us, so far as is possible in realizing the universal tendency in the same direction in spite of apparent evidences to the contrary. We are all on the path, and the road leads forever upward, with frequent resting places. Show me the resting places, Ninja. Show me. Where is they? Because I'm not seeing anything. Okay, so we are all on the path, and the road leads ever upward with frequent resting places. Maybe he means you die for a minute, and then you're born again and keep going. Read the message of the Kybalion and follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistakes of the half-wise. Walk with knowledge wisely, who perish by reason of their folly. We do not live in a world of dreams, but in a universe which, while relative, is real so far as our lives and actions are concerned. Our business in the universe is not to deny its existence, but to live using the laws to rise from lower to higher. And so, there is a couple of really important bits of wisdom that a lot of people struggle with. I kind of struggled with it for a while. It actually almost neutralized me completely. Like, I pretty much bailed on the entire path, which cost me all kinds of, you can't do that. You can't do that. A magical oath cannot be broken. So, and also, once you've built a bunch of momentum in a certain direction, if you suddenly, like, the train just crashes and rolls down the side of the mountain, you can't. Once you've committed to a certain trajectory, man, you better fucking maintain it. I learned that the hard way. And now she's gone. Like, the person I abandoned my mission for, that didn't even last, so that was dumb. And I knew that, it's not like I didn't know all this stuff already, but so careful out there, you guys. Some of these girls are just too much. Really derail even a monster of a person. Get back on the track, though. And at any rate, what I was getting at is if you accept, not by doctrine, not because of admiration for some individual, but because of observation for yourself, that these Hermetic principles are true, and they're not just Hermetic principles. Science even has incorporated a lot of it because it's just reality. But every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And people think that means, like, okay, so if I slam a ball with a bat, it's going to go it's going to go flying. And stuff like that. But it's not just that. These laws govern everything. So when you do something good, the anti-corollary is something bad happens. If you do something bad, the anti-corollary is that something good happens. This is why the Buddha said, if you wish to escape the cycle of samsara, you must sit and you must do nothing. Because anything you do, if you do good, you have karma for creating evil. If you do evil, then you have karma for creating good. And it may just balance itself out in the end, but still, understanding this, realizing that it's never going to change and that it really doesn't matter. Like, you're not going to be judged and sent to hell. You're not. You might have some transactional karmic reprobating that you have to do, but, evil is just as necessary as good. So how can you punish the brother of the left-hand path for creating the ultimate good by doing the ultimate evil. And so knowing that is just super, super mindfuck, you know. It's true, you know. And this is one of the reasons it's so fundamentally, integrally important that we all know our true purpose and nature. Because for me, having been thoroughly grounded myself when I came upon this knowledge, even though I knew I could access tremendous power by, you know, abandoning ethics, I didn't want to, you know. I knew that I had pierced the veil and gotten attainment of a pretty high level, and I knew that I had the keys to the kingdom where the sun never shines. And for any person, that's very tempting. And it's not my nature. So the trick is, a lot of people don't understand that you can know something, and it doesn't mean you support it. You know, it's really shocked me over the years how many times I've encountered this thing where I'm explaining how something works and it's uncomfortable, and then people kind of attack me as if I'm supporting it because the universe decided to operate that way, and I noticed. You know what I mean? That's like, I don't get it. So that's the thing, you know. You have to be able to compartmentalize and say, okay, well, I understand this, but it is my will to be a shepherd of men, or not, you know. Maybe it is your will to be a serial killer. You know, we need those too, as crazy as that sounds. But there's, in a sense, not a grain of sand out of place in the entire universe. So, you know, and part of the reason that, at least, you know, coming from this school of thinking, is that the grand consciousness, the universal mind, the all, is only fulfilling every possible experience. It gives no fucks whether they're good or bad or pleasure or pain, or it's just the experience. You know, it is equally invested in experience getting itself blown up on the battlefield as it is, you know, going to bed on LSD with 4 girls or whatever. They're just different experiences, and it doesn't have any preference. That's the point, you know, of omniscience. Omnipresence. What is it? Omnipresence, omniscience, and omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence. The omnipotence isn't real anyways. But the first two, you know, without judgment. Omniscience and omnipresence without judgment. And they say that God is nothing as well. And that God is everywhere and God is timeless. So if matter is really empty space, and matter is God, then God is nothing. Yeah, and there's a little bit of argument against asceticism here, you know, which I think that kind of denial is not good. You know, you want to have the utmost experiences possible, the most beautiful and intense and strange and unique. And so asceticism as a path to higher consciousness is just not, you're kind of denying God when you do that, you know. And also just that whole Christian thing of like, don't have sex till you're married and restrict yourself from all this stuff. It's also sinful. Enjoy all things of sense and rapture, and fear not that any God will deny thee for this. The true meaning of life is not known to men. I don't think that's true. We are, I mean, at least our lives relative to the big picture, we're here for the experience. We are the sensory organs of the universe. That's it. That's it. You know, this is your kingdom. Do as thou wilt. Try not to kill anyone. That's it. Chapter 7. The all is all. While all is in the all, it is equally true that the all is in all. To him who truly understands this, truth hath come great knowledge. And again, your success will be your proof. Divided by 0, infinity, right? So the all is in the all. If it's infinite, it's actually infinity. It may just be a symbolic representation of that that we can see, and work out on paper. But you can just divide a number infinitely, and so everything contains infinity, because all is number. So the holographic nature of the universe is confirmed. And you can see it in so many different ways, the different scales of like how all these different galaxies look exactly like a cluster of neurons. And there's like eyeballs. I saw a perfect like vagina coming out of some weird ass gas thing. But I mean, it looked like an artist had drawn it, like AI generated it or something. And it wasn't AI, apparently. There were people in the thread that knew what it was, and I just don't remember. It's kind of like the opposite of a black hole. So there's like buttholes and vaginas floating around in space. Oh my God, eating light. And there's a very good chance that we're actually in a black hole, because nothing moves faster than light except for the expansion of the universe. Well, if a black hole can pull light into it, that means that its force of attraction is greater than the acceleration of the light, which means that we're probably inside of a giant fucking black hole that has black holes in it. And you know what I mean? Like that, the fact that the edge of it is expanding the event horizon, the only thing that moves faster than light or has greater force than light. How often have the majority of people heard repeated the statement that their deity, called by many names, was all in all, and how little have they suspected the inner occult truths concealed by these carelessly uttered words? The commonly used expression is a survival of the ancient Hermetic maxim quoted above. As the Kybalion says, to him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. And this being so, let us seek this truth, the understanding of which means so much. In the statement of truth, this Hermetic maximum is concealed one of the greatest philosophical, scientific, and religious truths. We have given you the Hermetic teachings regarding to the mental nature of the universe, the truth that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. As the Kybalion says in the passage quoted above, all is in the all. But note that the correlated statement that it is equally true that the all is the all, this apparently contradictory statement is reconcilable under the law of paradox. All of these things are true and false, and it is both true and false to say that they are true and false. It is moreover an exact Hermetic statement of the relations existing between the all and the mental universe. We have seen how the all is in the all. Now let us examine the other aspect of the subject. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the all is immanent in, remaining within, inherent, abiding within. Its universe, and in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe. This statement is usually illustrated by the teachers by a reference to the principle of correspondence. The teacher instructs the student to form a mental image of something, a person, an idea, something having a mental form. The favorite example being that of the author or dramatist forming an idea of his characters, or a painter or sculptor forming an image of an ideal that he wishes to express by his art. In each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and being solely within his own mind, yet he, the student, author, dramatist, painter, or sculptor, is, in a sense, immanent in, remaining within, or abiding within the mental image also. In other words, the entire virtue, life, spirit of reality in the mental image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. Consider this for a moment until the idea is grasped. Basically, he's saying that without conceptualization, there's no actualization. So, have you ever seen a chair just build itself? Have you ever seen a fucking tornado go over a junkyard and assemble a 747 accidentally? You know what I mean? That's kind of what, like, random mutations, that's kind of what they're kind of acting like. Not to mention the fact that something somehow randomly animated us, What the hell, Where'd that come from? So, I don't know if it's really that solid of an argument to say that, like, have you ever seen a chair build itself when it's like, okay, well then what created God then? And I do have an answer, I think, maybe. If you're going to be honest, it's never certain. But it makes sense to me that, this Kabbalistic idea, it exists in several traditions, I guess, that there was nothingness became conscious. And so My suspicion is that there is no omnipotent, omniscient God like that, but there is an intelligence that has become more sophisticated as the evolution of the universe has complexified. And there's actually a name for that. I thought of it on my own, but I wanted to see if anyone else had been thinking along those lines, and there is a name for that kind of thinking. So it just makes sense, that's the point of accruing experience and adding upon complexity upon complexity, and in the same way that when you take a drug like ayahuasca, your mind has to physically adapt to improve the hardware so that it can run the new program. They say that our mind works in 11 dimensions, but I think when you drink ayahuasca, you're probably observing more like 40 different dimensions. It's a whole different scale of experience that we don't even have language to describe. And I think that's also one of the reasons that psychedelics expand consciousness, because the brain physically has to adapt in order to process what it's being confronted with. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the all is luminant in, remaining within, inherent, abiding within. We already did that. In each case, let's find all the. Okay, yeah, we were just talking about how he's saying that the artist has to conceptualize something and then make it real. So there must be a mind that's conceiving the universe and making it real. But I think it's probably more along the lines of interaction, interfacing with it. So, spirit of the character, so this is an interesting thing. Who is the spirit of the characters that we know as Macabre, Oliver Twist, Uriah Heep? Is it Charles Dickens? Or have each of these characters a personal spirit, independent of their creator? This is a question that I have about plant medicine a lot. I'm not entirely convinced that it's the spirit of the plant that we're interacting with. In fact, I lean pretty far in the other direction. I think it's probably a matter of changing filters and frequency sweep in our brain, not really so much, dialogue with a vine. I mean, it just so goes against. Things in this universe have some sort of mechanistic way that they happen, This plant can tell you how to deal with a divorce and where to bury your mom, and it's been just sitting there in the ground in the jungle interacting with nothing. There's no reason to think that makes sense that I can see. And that's not what they've told me either. Anytime anytime I have proposed this to them, they always say that that's correct. Yeah, of course, stupid. Why would you even ask that? So maybe that's just their way of dealing with me. But and like I said, I can't be sure about anything. So when I say I don't really believe in these things, it doesn't mean that I'm you just can't be certain. I don't think. I'm curious to know for sure, and that's why I pursue it. It's not about proving people wrong or something, which is oftentimes how people react when I point this stuff out, But no, I just want to know what the hell's going on. Actually, I've posed that to numerous indigenous shaman, and they say, I don't know. Nobody knows. So people get mad at me for saying it, and it's well, instead of making assumptions based on the new age shit you read on the internet, written by some white person about what they think, why don't you just go ask them instead and just find out, what they think, rather than getting mad at me when they agree. So you guys see why I just stay in my own little bubble, and generally the people that are even pretty close to thinking, there's like-minded souls or whatever. Generally, it doesn't take me long to make them angry. So, but this is actually interesting. I should continue with this. The Venus of Medici, the Sistine Madonna, the Apollo Belvedere, spirits in reality of their own, or do they represent the spiritual and mental powers of their creators? The law of paradox explains that both propositions are true, viewed from proper viewpoints. Macabre is both Macabre and yet Dickens. And again, while macabre may said to be Dickens, Dickens is not identical with macabre. Man, like macabre, may exclaim, "The spirit of my creator is inherent within me, but yet I am not he." How different this from the shocking half-truth so vociferously announced by certain of the half-wise, who fill the air with their raucous cries of "I am God." Imagine poor macabre, or the sneaky Uriah Heep crying, "I am Dickens," or some of the lowly clods in one of Shakespeare's plays grandiloquently announcing that I am Shakespeare. The all is in the earthworm, and yet the earthworm is far from being the all. And still the wonder remains that though the earthworm exists merely as a lowly thing, created and having its being solely within the mind of the all, that the all is immanent to the earthworm, and in the particles that go to make up the earthworm. Can there be any greater mystery than this of all in the all in the all? Oh, the all in the all, and the all in all. Okay. The student will, of course, realize that the illustrations given above are necessarily imperfect and inadequate, for they represent the creation of mental images in finite minds, while the universe is a creation of an infinite mind, and the difference between the two poles separates them, and yet it is merely a matter of degree. The same principle is in operation. The principle of correspondence manifests each as above, so below, as below, so above. There's another interesting expression of that Keter is in Malkut, and Malkut is in Keter. And Keter is the light that came down through the tree and crystallized in matter. And then we start from the manifested and break down and go back into the light again. And it's kind of interesting that now we know that matter is light in a standing wave, and so that diagram is exactly correct. And the degrees that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit immanent within his being, so will he rise up in the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means, the recognition, realization, and manifestation of the spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition, that of spiritual development. It contains the truth of true religion. There are many planes of being, many subplanes of life, many degrees of existence in the universe, and all depend on the advancement of beings in the scale, of which scale the lowest point is the grossest matter, the highest being separated only by the thinnest division from the spirit of the all, and upward and onward along this scale of life. Everything is moving. All are on the path whose end is the all. All progress is a returning home. All is upward and onward, in spite of all seemingly contradictory appearances. Such is the message of the Illumined. Had to do that again. The Hermetic teachings concerning the process of the mental creation of the universe are that at the beginning of the creative cycle, the all in its aspect of being projects its will towards its aspect of becoming, and the process of creation begins. It is taught that the process consists of the lowering of vibration until a very low degree of vibratory energy is reached, at which point the grossest possible form of matter is manifested. This process is called the stage of involution, in which the all becomes involved or wrapped up in its creation. Oh man, I had a really good, I have to watch that again. I made a video about that exact thing, but it's a physicist talking about it. I have to refresh my brain on that because it was a really good concept. This process is believed by the Hermeticists to have a correspondence to the mental process of an artist, writer, or inventor who becomes so wrapped up in his mental creation as to almost forget his own existence, and who, for the time being, lives in his creation. This is kind of what we do when we enter into flow state. Yeah, if instead of wrapped, we use the word rapt, R-A-P-T, perhaps we will give a better idea of what is meant. This involuntary stage of creation is sometimes called the outpouring of the divine energy, just as the evolutionary state is called the indrawing. The extreme pole of the creative process is considered to be the furthest removed from the all, while the beginning of the evolutionary stage is regarded as the beginning of the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm, a coming home, idea being held in all of the Hermetic teachings. The teachings are that during the outpouring, the vibrations become lower and lower until finally the urge ceases and the return swing begins. This is also called quantum loop theory in physics, and it's a description of also the Kabbalah where the light goes and crystallizes and then returns again. But there is this difference, that while in the outpouring the creative forces manifest compactly and as a whole, yet from the beginning of the evolutionary indrawing stage, there is manifested the law of individualization that is the tendency to separate into units of force, so that finally that which left the all as unindividualized energy returns to its source as countless highly developed units of life, having risen higher and higher and higher in the scale by means of physical, mental, and spiritual evolution. The ancient Hermeticists used the word meditation in describing the process of the mental creation of the universe in the mind of the all, the word contemplation also being frequently employed. But the idea intended seems to be that of the employment of the divine attention. Attention is a word derived from the Latin root, meaning to reach out, to stretch out, and so the act of intention is really a mental reaching out, extension of mental energy, so that the underlying idea is readily understood when we examine into the real meaning of attention. The Hermetic teachings regarding the process of evolution are that the all, having meditated upon the beginning of creation, having thus established the material foundations of the universe, having thought it into existence, then gradually awakens or rouses from its meditation, and in so doing starts into manifestation and processes of evolution on the material, mental, and spiritual planes, successively and in order. Thus the upward movement begins, and all begins to move spiritward. Matter becomes less gross, the units spring into being, the combinations begin to form, life appears and manifests in higher and higher forms. The mind becomes more and more in evidence, the vibrations constantly becoming higher. In short, the entire process of evolution and all of its phases begins and proceeds according to the established laws of the indrawing process. Systole and diastole, systole and diastole, systole and diastole. Expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction. But all this to the all is but a twinkle of the eye. At the end of countless cycles and aeons of time, the all withdraws its attention, its contemplation and meditation of the universe, for the great work is finished, and all is withdrawn into the all from which it emerged. But mystery of mysteries, the spirit of each soul is not annihilated, but is infinitely expanded. The creator and the creator are merged. Such is the report of the Illumined. The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening from meditation of the all is, of course, but an attempt to the teachers to describe the infinite process by a finite example, and yet as above, so below. The difference is merely in degree. And just as the all arouses itself from the meditation upon the universe, so does man, in time, cease from manifesting upon the material plane and withdraws himself more and more into the indwelling spirit, which is indeed the divine ego. There is one more matter of which we desire to speak in this lesson, and that comes very near to an invasion of the metaphysical field of speculation, which we try to avoid like the plague. We allude to the question which inevitably comes to the mind of all thinkers who have ventured to seek the truth. The question is, why does the all create universes? The question may be asked in different forms, but the above is the gist of the inquiry. Men have striven hard to answer this question, but still there is no answer worthy of the name. Some have imagined that the all had something to gain by it, but this is absurd, for what could the all gain that it did not already possess? Others have sought the answer in the idea that the all wished something to love, and others that it created for pleasure or amusement, or because it was lonely, or to manifest its power, or puerile explanations and ideas belonging to the childish period of thought. Others have sought to explain the mystery by assuming the all found itself compelled to create, by reason of its own internal nature, its creative instinct. This idea is in advance of the others, but its weak point lies in the idea that the all, being compelled by anything, internal or external, is ludicrous. If its internal nature or creative instinct compelled it to do anything, then the internal nature or creative instinct would be the absolute instead of the all. And so accordingly, that part of the proposition fails. And yet the all does create and manifest, and seems to find some kind of satisfaction in so doing, or why would it do it? And it is difficult to escape the conclusion that in some infinite degree, it must have what would correspond to an inner nature or a creative instinct in man with the correspondingly infinite desire and will. It could not act unless it willed to act, and it would not will to act unless it desired to act, and it would not desire to act unless it obtained some satisfaction thereby. And all of these things would belong to an inner nature, and might be postulated as existing according to the law of correspondence. But still, we prefer to think of the all as acting entirely free from any influence, internal as well as external. That is the problem which lies at the root of difficulty, and the difficulty that lies at the root of the problem. And so, why don't we stop before I drop dead? I'm actually just going to get some water, and then if you guys have any questions, I can take a few minutes to answer them. In the meantime, email me Lamborghinis, shit like that. You know, if you have the Hope necklace laying around and you don't need it, I'll give you my address. Or join the Patreon. That might be more realistic, I'm not sure. Water and dried blueberries. So what's up? I mean, you guys have any thoughts or anything that maybe I can help you sort? Going once, going twice. Why is my internet slow? All right, well, we just got 3 more people on. We are in the AMA phase of this 3-hour live stream now. So if you have any questions or just general subjects that I might shed some light on, I can have a few more minutes before I need to go hang upside down in the bat cave and drink a few liters of adrenochrome. Nice. Want a dried blueberry? Here we go. It's delicious. Well, the math study, I have to admit I'm in pretty preliminary stages because I basically dropped out of school in like the 7th grade or something, and I don't regret that, but I do regret not realizing that some of the information that they were trying to give me, it would have been much better to do it then than to do it now. So basically what I did to get started is I went to Science Dave, you know, that really like arrogant dickhead dude with the bent nose, and he's always debunking flat earth. Professor Dave Explains. And that's funny because I can't stand his personality. It just makes my skin crawl. But he made a series of mathematical tutelage videos. So I had to start at long division. I couldn't even remember how to do that. And one day I went from like 7th grade to college math, It took 4 hours or something, but that really shocked me. And what I realized from doing that is that I had such low self-esteem in junior high school. My dad was an uneducated redneck, and not even my biological father. So, but I had this idea that I couldn't do it, I think. And then this was only like, the week Enrique and I split up, so pretty recently. I realized that it was my own ideas about my limitations that had stopped me from learning math in the first place. So since we just split up, I've been, the first 2 days, I just drank like completely, insanely, excessively. But then I realized pretty quickly, like, no, you can't let it drag you down. You have to propel upwards. So that's when I made the list of things that, and actually imposed a schedule on myself, But I think I made it to the near algebra. So in a week or something. So my goal is to just continue math tutelage for the rest of my life. So, by the time I'm 50, I should be able to do like quantum equations and, but I mean, let that be an inspiration, you guys, because I was not expecting that at all, man. When I realized I'd gotten through the entire high school mathematics starting in junior high in like one day, maybe like 4 or 5 hours the first day, and then like a couple hours the next day. I had to go back and review some of it, I had to look up so many terms too. Because you don't want to just do it by rote, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to just like memorize, like you want to understand why you're doing it, like what is it functionally? Because particularly with calculus, I think, when you're describing curves and stuff with the equations, you notice that the images that you created by the basic equations are very similar to the kind of shifting geometries and stuff that I sometimes see when I take certain psychedelics. And that really kind of confirmed to me that this idea that absorbing this knowledge would have an effect on how effective you are at reading the sign symbols and hints and clues and processing the information that's available to us in the universe. Jonah's asking about books. This one. It is, let's see if that's in focus. Yeah, you guys can probably read that. So basically what it says is that it's not supposed to be in the hands of non-Masons, so do not go and get on Amazon and order a copy of it. I think what happened is that enough widows of Masons were created and they just didn't know any better, and they just, over time, took this book because it says to be returned to lodge upon death or withdrawal of recipient. So I think that's probably how I found my copy. But it's absolutely sublime. And it's very, very huge. And here it's just the very first paragraph for the apprentice. Force, unregulated or ill-regulated, is not only wasted in the void, like that of gunpowder burned in the open air, and steam unconfined by science, but striking in the dark, and its blows meeting only the air, they recoil and bruise itself. It is destruction and ruin. It is the volcano, the earthquake, the cyclone, not growth and progress. It is Polyphemus blinded, striking at random and falling headlong among the sharp rocks by the impetus of his own blows. The blind force of the people is a force that must be economized and also managed, as the blind force of steam, lifting the ponderous iron arms and turning the large wheels. It is made to bore and rifle the canon, and to weave the most delicate lace. It must be regulated by intellect. Intellect is to the people and the people's force what the slender needle of the compass is to the ship, its soul, always counseling the huge mass of wood and iron and always pointing to the north. To attack the citadels built upon all sides against the human race by superstitions, despotism, and prejudice, the force must have a brain. Then its deeds of daring produce permanent results, and there is real progress. Then there are sublime conquests. Thought is a force, and philosophy should be an energy, finding its aim and its effects in the amelioration of mankind. The two great motors are truth and love. When all of these forces are combined aright and guided by the intellect and regulated by the rule of right and justice, and if combined in systematic movement and effort, the great revolution prepared for by the ages will begin to march. The power of the deity himself is in equilibrium with his wisdom. Hence, the only result possible is harmony. It is because force is ill-regulated that revolutions prove failures. Therefore, it is so often that insurrections coming from those high mountains that domineer over the moral horizon, justice, wisdom, reason, right, built of the purest snow of the ideal, after a long fall from rock to rock, after having reflected the sky in their transparency, and been swollen by 100 affluents, in the majestic path of triumph, suddenly lose themselves in quagmires, like a California river in the sands. The onward march of the human race requires that the heights around it should blaze with noble and enduring lessons of courage, deeds of daring dazzle history, and form one class of the guiding light of man. They are the stars and coruscations from that great sea of electricity, the force inherent in the people. To strive, to brave all risks, to perish, to persevere, to be true to oneself, to grapple body to body with destiny, to surprise defeat by the little terror it inspires, now to confront unrighteous power, now to defy intoxicated triumph. These are the examples that the nations need and the light that electrifies them. There are immense forces in the great caverns of evil beneath society, in the hidden degradation, squalor, wretchedness, and destitution, vices and crimes that reek and slimmer in the darkness, in that populace below the people of great cities. Their disinterestedness vanishes. Everyone howls, searches, gropes, and gnaws on himself. Ideas are ignored, and of progress there is no thought. This populace has two mothers, both of them stepmothers, ignorance and misery. Want is their only guide, for their appetite alone they crave satisfaction. Yet even these may be employed. The lowly sand we trample upon, cast into the furnace, melted, purified by fire, may become resplendent crystal. They have the brute force of the hammer, but their blows help on the great cause, when struck within the lines traced by the rule held by wisdom and discretion. Yet it is this very force of the people, this titanic power of the giants, that builds the fortifications of tyrants and is embodied in their armies. Hence the possibility of such tyrannies of those of which it has been said that Rome smells worse under Vitellius than under Sulla, under Trump and under Biden. There is a deformity of baseness corresponding to the ugliness of the tyranny. The foulness of the slaves is a direct result of the atrocious basement of the despot. A miasma exhales from these crouching consciences that reflect their master. The public authorities are unclean, hearts are collapsed, consciousness shrunken, souls puny. This is so under Trump, it is so under Biden, it is so under Obama, and it is so under Caesar. There comes only the rank odor peculiar to the eagle's eyrie. It is the force of the people that sustains all these despotisms, the basest as well as the best. That force acts through armies, and these often are enslaved and liberate. Despotism there applies the rule. Force is the mace of steel at the saddle bow of the knight or of the bishop in armor. Passive obedience by force supports thrones and oligarchies, Spanish kings and Venetian senates. Might in an army wielded by tyranny is the enormous sum total of utter weakness of all of humanity. And so humanity wages war against humanity in spite of humanity. So a people willingly submits to despotism, and its workmen submit to be despised, and its soldiers to be whipped and spit upon. Therefore it is that battles lost by a nation are often progress attained. Less glory is more liberty. When the drum is silent, reasons, sometimes speaks. Tyrants use the force of the people to chain and to subjugate, that is, to yoke the people. Then they plow with them as men do with oxen. Thus, the spirit of liberty and innovation is reduced by bayonets, and principles are struck dumb by cannon shot, while the monks mingle with the troopers, and the church, militant and jubilant, Catholic or Puritan, sings Te Deums for victories over rebellion. The military power, not subordinate to the civil power, the hammer or mace of force, independent of the rule, is an armed tyranny, born full grown, as Athene sprang from the brain of Zeus. It spawns a dynasty and begins with Caesar to rot in Vitellius and Commodus. And at the present day, it inclines to begin where formerly dynasties ended. Constantly, the people put forth immense strength, only to end in immense weakness. The force of the people is exhausted, and indefinitely prolonging things long since dead, and governing mankind by embalming old tyrannies of faith, restoring dilapidated dogmas, regilding faded worm-eaten shrines, whitening and rousing ancient and barren superstitions, saving society by multiplying parasites, perpetuating and superannuating into institutions, enforcing the worship of symbols as a means of salvation, and tying the dead corpse of the past, mouth to mouth, with the living present. Therefore it is that one of the fatalities of humanity is to be condemned to eternal struggles with phantoms, with superstitions, bigotries, hypocrisies, prejudices, the formulas of error, and the pleas of tyranny. Despotisms seen in the past become respectable, as the mountain bristling with volcanic rock, rugged and horrid, seen through the haze of distance is blue and smooth and beautiful. The sight of a single dungeon of tyranny is worth more to dispel illusions and create a holy hatred of despotism and to direct force aright than the most eloquent volumes. The French should have studied the Bastille as a perpetual lesson. Italy should not destroy the dungeons of the Inquisition. The force of the people maintained the power that built its gloomy cells and placed the living in their granite sepulchres. The force of the people cannot, by its unrestrained and fitful action, maintain and commit and continue in action and existence a free government once created. That force must be limited, restrained, conveyed by distribution into different channels, and by roundabout courses to outlets, whence it is to issue as the law, action, and decision of the state, as the wise old Egyptian kings conveyed in different canals, by subdivision, the swelling waters of the Nile, and compelled them to fertilize and not to devastate the land. There must be the jus et norma, the law and rule, or gauge of constitution and law, within which the public force must act. Make a breach in either, and the great steam hammer, with its swift and ponderous blows, crushes all the machinery to atoms, and at last, wrenching itself away, lies inert and dead amid the ruin it has wrought. The force of the people, or the popular will, in action, and exhorted, symbolized by the gavel, regulated and guided by the acting within the limits of law and order, symbolized by the 24-inch rule, has for its fruit liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty regulated by law, equality of rights in the eye of the law, brotherhood with its duties and obligations as well as its benefits. You will hear shortly of the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar as the part of jewels of the lodge. The rough ashlar is said to be a stone as taken from the quarry in its rude and natural state. The perfect ashlar is said to be a stone made ready by the hands of the workman to be adjusted by the working tools of the fellow craft. We shall not repeat the explanation of these symbols given in the York Rite. You may read them in the printed monitors. They are declared to allude to the self-improvement of the individual, a continuation of the same superficial interpretation. The rough ashlar is the people, as a mass, rude and unorganized. The perfect ashlar, or cubical stone, symbol of perfection, is the state, the rulers deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, the constitution and laws speaking the will of the people, the government harmonious, symmetrical, efficient, its powers properly distributed and duly adjusted in equilibrium. So, it's really with that until it started getting kind of like, and the state is perfect. And it's just, bro, slow down a little bit. But yeah, that's morals and dogma And it's not all exactly like that. There's a lot of variation in the Kabbalistic instruction. Sublime prince of the royal secret. The occult science of the ancient magi was concealed under the shadows of the ancient mysteries. It was imperfectly revealed, or rather disfigured, by the Gnostics. It is guessed at under the obscurities that cover the pretended crimes of the Templars, and it is found enveloped in enigmas that seem impenetrable in the rites of the history of Freemasonry. Magism was the science of Abraham and Orpheus, of Confucius and Zoroaster. It was the dogmas of this science that were engraven on the tables of stone by Hanok and Trismegistus. Moses purified and reveiled them, for that is the meaning of the word reveal, actually to hide. Everything contains its contradiction. He covered them with a new veil when he made of the Holy Kabbalah the exclusive heritage of the people of Israel and the invisible secrets of the priest, the inviolable secret of the priest. The mysteries of Thebes and Eleusis preserved among the nations some symbols of it already altered, and the mysterious key whereof was lost among the instruments of an ever-growing superstition. Jerusalem, the murderess of her prophets, and so often prostituted to the false gods of the Syrians and Babylonians, had at length in its turn lost the holy word when a prophet announced to the Magi by the concentrated star of initiation came to rend asunder the worn veil of the old temple in order to give the church a new issue of legends and symbols that still and ever conceals from the profane and ever preserves to the elect the ancient truths. And then he's talking about Hermetic Freemasons and the secrets of the Illuminati and their strange rites and signs and symbols. And so there's all kinds of wild good shit in that book. I would also say Don Milo Duquette's book about the Crowley's Thoth deck, the Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley, the Book of Lies by Aleister Crowley, all of Robert Anton Wilson's stuff, but particularly the Illuminatus trilogy and Prometheus Rising and Cosmic Trigger 1, The Final Secret of the Illuminati. It's all good shit. So, appreciate y'all ninjas, keeping it real. Timer says 3 hours, 30 minutes. I have to have some voice left for tomorrow. So, good night, y'all. And I appreciate that all of you have signed up to the, are about to sign up to the $100 tier so we can do 4 30-minute sessions, one a week on my Patreon, or, whatever, buy me a Ferrari, and then I can sell it and feed a bunch of children or something. Good night.